course, sponsored by In the Keep. Make sure you visit inthekeep.com for the In the Keep podcast and all of their great content. As far as introductions go, we could probably spend an entire show going over the accomplishments of our guest today. In the late 90s, he founded the Doom clan Unidoom, aka UD, and UD went on to have great competitive success in the clan scene. But their biggest acclaim could arguably be the UDM series of deathmatch WODs, ranging from UDM 1 in 2002 to the most recent release of UDMX in 2008. Many of the maps in those WODs are considered to be the best DM maps of all time, being played in various tournaments and events. He was an original member of the Z-Damon team, and a fun fact for people that don't know, he is the one who actually came up with the name Z-Damon. Following his departure from the Z-Damon community, he founded the source port Odamex in late 2005. Although it was several years behind in development compared to its competitors, Odamex has grown into an actively competitive port with ongoing leagues and events, including being selected as the official port of QuakeCon Doom tournaments for 3 separate years. And as if all of this wasn't enough, he achieved even greater fame as the sole founder of the International Doom League, or as we now know it, the World Doom League. Spanning 25 seasons, the combined heritage of the IDL and WDL make it the largest and longest enduring Doom League in history. Let's not spoil everything for you, and hopefully we've stroked his ego to his satisfaction with an introduction like that. I am happy to welcome Ralphis to the show.
Oh, well, thank you. That was, yes, quite an intro. I appreciate the pomp and circumstance. So, thank you. It's good to be here, finally.
Finally, you're right. We've been trying to get him on since episode 1, but he is slippery. And I think, he had, well, what did you say? You had kind of a break for a little while there. You had a couple years off where you really weren't running anything. You were just kind of, taking it easy. And that was probably the first time that you did that in your entire online Doom existence, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I don't know, let's say about mid 2008 till, I guess, last summer of 2020. Yeah, I pretty much was off for 2 years. A nice little sabbatical. It wasn't like I had totally tuned out or anything. I'm still in the Discords and I still kind of see everything that's going on, but I definitely was a lot less active than I used to be, and it was very, it was good for my mental health. I think everyone should consider doing it after you've been around here for 20 years.
Didn't you meet up with some Doom folks in Texas, though, in that period?
In Texas? No. In Texas? Wait, am I forgetting something?
I think you've shown some pics.
Oh, yes, of course, duh. Yeah, so Sponge. You talk about Sponge? Yeah, you're right, and the rest of the crew. I totally forgot. Yeah, that was right before the pandemic, so I got in right before. I think that was late January of 2020. So for those that don't know, I worked on a WOD called Double Impact that had won a CAC award like 10 years ago, and leading up to the new release of the new Unity Doom port, Sponge had reached out to me and Rot King and asked if we wanted Double Impact to go on there, and it would be the first kind of community WOD that would be freely distributed to people that had that port. And so, of course, we said yes, and they paid us a lot of money. So, of course, we said yes, and after that, I had already had a little bit of a relationship with Sponge, so I found out that I was actually going to be in that area, and I got kind of free one day, so I just happened to reach out to him to say, hey, like, what's the chance of you sneaking me into the building? And he was like, yeah, come over. So I went over and got to check out the offices. It was very, very awesome. And I got a couple cool pictures, too, with the original Spider Demon model and a couple of the new Doom, like the Revenant and like the Doom Slayer, like life-size model. It was pretty freaking sweet. It was a nice I guess like after doing this for 20 years and being so involved, it was definitely a cool way to, kind of lead up to that, and it was awesome.
Yeah, I gotta say I'm envious because basically I missed Sponge during the 2019 QuakeCon. Like, he was the only person I didn't get to meet because he was too busy in the background and everything. I had the
Yeah.
same story as you, basically with the back to Saturn X, of course.
Right.
I'm also rich with Doom money.
Oh yeah, it's been excellent for us. I know. It was cool. And Sponge is a cool dude, and I'd worked with him back in like 2012 or 2013. I mean, back when we were all kicking around on IRC together, and when they were doing that first QuakeCon Doom tournament in 2013. Of course, I was out there stumping hard for Odamex to be the engine that they used, which they did end up ultimately using, and they've used it a couple times since then. And I've had a little bit of relationship with him since then, but he's just a cool, easygoing guy. Get along well with him. We both like pro wrestling, and so we after we did our little tour. I got to meet Donna Jackson. After that, we went out and got some barbecue, which was like the most kick-ass barbecue ever. I moved to Florida from Pennsylvania a few years ago. The barbecue's really good down here, but man, that stuff we had out there was just like so good. I wish this pandemic crap didn't happen, so I could go back out there for like QuakeCon or something just to go to that barbecue place. It's that good. But when we were there, I'd gone out with a couple other people that night too. It was Zazer, Wartorn, and oh
TDM,
yeah,
TDF,
TDF, yeah.
TDM.
I see the initials in my head, but it's like the Doom Freak. Yes, TDF. Who's also a cool guy. I actually met him. I actually met the three of those guys before I went out there this time when Demon Sphere had passed away back in 2017, and I went out there and I drove up to Oklahoma, and they actually had come up, which was really nice. So that was the first time I'd met them. We all went out and we ate, and so it's cool to run into people and see people. That's definitely one cool thing about Doom and being around for so long. Where I remember back when I was just getting started as a kid, the internet was still a little mysterious and scary to like a lot of parents, and they were like, don't talk to anybody, and don't give anyone your information. And now we're just like all meeting up constantly, and it's the same people we've been talking to for 10, 20 years. So it's been pretty cool to make those sorts of friendships, I think.
Yep. You can pretty much travel anywhere in the world, and there will be someone willing to, take you in for a night, have a dinner with you.
pretty much. I guess it was maybe 2 years ago. I went on a road trip with my wife before we were kind of starting our jobs. We were like, hey, we're not going to have time to do this. Like, if we don't do it now, so let's go do it. So we drove around the whole United States for like a month, which is too long for a road trip, by the way. But so maybe in like the second week, I think we went up through Minnesota, which is where Alt Stab, which like a lot of Doom World people won't know who that is, but he's a major part of like multiplayer Doom and WDL, and he lives up there. So I just happened to be swinging through, and I was like, "Hey man, like, what you doing?" And it's exactly like you said. Like, we got to get together, and we just had some beers, and it was on a Sunday, so we got to watch football. And his football team was playing my football team, so it was like a lot of fun. So yeah, I mean, it is awesome to just kind of run into Doom players all over the country. And at this point, I know so many of them that I could probably pick anyone from 50 states or other countries at this point.
Was your wife like, is this another Doom person? Oh my god.
Well, so
you had a whole cavalcade of them, right, at your wedding.
Yeah, at our wedding, I think she'd already gotten that feeling probably when I had a full table of like Doom players. And some of my friends from Philadelphia are also, she probably doesn't look at them as like Doom players, but like K Blair, he happened to just live around me. So we met through Doom, but then we became friends and lived down the street from each other. And Fran, SSG Hammer, and Tony, also known as Clem Hazard. He lived in the area, so she didn't really look at them as like Doom players. But then I had people like Bones come in, and Alt Stab, and Demon Sphere, Rot King. We had like a whole table of Doom players. So, yeah, I mean, they definitely like creeped out all the other guests, but other than that, it was pretty good. I think she's cool with it. My wife's pretty cool, so yeah, no problems there.
So, but if you go, if you go back to the beginning of the internet, right, which is pretty much when you started playing Doom, the late '90s. I think I was trying to remember. I know that you said the first person you played Doom against was Toke, right?
That's true. So,
but you were a Sega guy, weren't you?
Well, okay. So, I guess if we're going to talk about like my formative Doom years here, the first version of Doom I ever had was I think it was like 1995. My parents bought me like a secondhand Sega Genesis with a 32X, and I either rented the game. I think I rented Doom, and then I like told them like I need to buy this game. But I know everyone busts on the 32X version, but considering that it was going to be years before my family got a computer, I really hadn't seen Doom, and just it was like so different from like Sonic or stuff like that I had, and it was just totally captivating. And actually, I was only 7 years old, so it scared the crap out of me. So it was I was like constantly playing it for only 15 levels, and I know everyone says like the music sucks or whatever, but it was all cool to me. So I got like addicted to that version, and then I got the Super Nintendo version, which had a couple more monsters. It had some more episodes. So at that point, I kind of was like a Doom veteran. Then I had a friend that had the computer, and I got to see the computer version of Doom, and I was like, oh my god, this is like the greatest thing ever. I freaking love this game. So then it was like maybe 2 or 3 more years. I think we got like a compact when families were starting to get computers. I mean, a personal computer at that time cost like $2,000 or something crazy. So we got a desktop, and the first thing I did was I called the local Best Buy, and I was like, hey, like, do you guys have Doom and Doom 2? And the guy was like, yeah. And I was like, can you please hold that for me? Don't let anyone buy it. And he was like, and keep in mind, it's like 1998 now. So he's like, yeah, you got it, kid, or whatever. So like I got there, and I bought the Depths of Doom trilogy for the PC. I had Ultimate Doom, Doom 2, and the Master Levels, which I didn't even figure out how to use for a long time. But so that was kind of like my PC introduction to Doom. Now, leading up to me getting a computer, I also was still like super into Doom, and I like had a friend that had a computer, so we were kind of like messing around with it a little bit. And I started a website called Unidoom on this old like template making website of the 90s. I actually tried to hit it with the Wayback Machine. There's barely anything left from it. It's that old. It was called Max Pages, and it was like maxpages.com/Unidoom, and I was reviewing like Doom levels, but I didn't really know about like custom WADs yet. So I was just reviewing levels from the game that had been out for I don't know, like 4 or 5 years. So that's actually how the name Unidoom came about. It didn't start as like a clan or anything, and I wasn't playing online yet. So as I started to learn more about using my computer and kind of started playing around with it, I eventually found the DOS version of Doom on the disk, whereas I'd been using the Doom 95 front end before that. So for whatever reason, like that led to me learning about the master levels. I think there was maybe some sort of batch script or something. And after I saw those new levels, I was like, holy crap, I didn't know you could make levels for this game. This is crazy. Like, this is what I always dreamed of. Like, I always dreamed of making levels for Doom. And now it's clearly being done somehow. I mean, they have like Star Wars music and stuff in them. So I don't know how these like exist. So I kind of started like looking around a little more, and I think I found Doom World, and Doom World was like real early in its life. I don't even think it had comments or anything yet. I don't think it even got comments for like a year after that. So I found Doom World sometime in like 98 or maybe early 99. And from there, they used to have a bunch of pages with like source ports and stuff. I didn't really understand the source port thing yet, but I found DoomServe. Now, the thought of DoomServe has kind of been lost to time, but basically before there was CS Doom, which led to the Zandronums and Z-Daemons and Odamexes of today, there was no way to play like a client server, like just jump into a server. You had to connect to people kind of old school. You'd usually just connect to one person. If you connected to like 2 or 3 people, the game would desync, and it sucked. It was not fun. So basically, what I did was I got on DoomServe. I was a dumbass kid. I know I was annoying as hell, but there was fortunately some nice people in there that were, aside from the ones that were just like busting on me and clowning on me. Like I remember Fod was an older guy on there, and he helped me get set up. He taught me how to get ZDoom set up, which was what DoomServe used. So after I got that set up, also at the same time was Toke, another player from the time who was new. I think I might have been like one of his first games too. We both showed up on DoomServe around the same time, and we played against each other. And I think the first deathmatch I played online was against Toke on Doom 2 Map 13. And we used to play Map 13 like all the time for some reason. I guess, it was like long before the competitive there wasn't like a standard really. The only standard map that people played was Doom 2 Map 1 for the most part. Maybe Dwango 5 Map 1, but other than that, you pretty much would just kind of play whatever. So we would kind of just play around on that, and yeah, I mean from there I just started learning more. I learned more people. Eventually I learned about IRC, and I started annoying other people that way. So I was a very annoying kid. I know that. I can say that.
So this eventually leads to the start of the entire multiplayer saga of Doom. I mean the CS ports, which started with CS Doom, of course.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. So DoomServe was pretty popular, but it had its issues. I remember one big thing that happened, I think, before even people started to move away from it was some of the Doom World guys, I think it was like Arkin and I don't know, maybe like Mystician, found an exploit with the program wasn't like the greatest program thing ever. So they found some exploits, and they basically were either like taking over the server or they were like crashing it. I don't remember exactly what it was. And I think they told the guy that ran DoomServe, Tigo, that like how to fix it, but I don't know if he was like capable of it. I just don't know if he was like a great programmer or anything. And things were a little more held together with duct tape back then for sure. But that pretty much kind of put a hurting on DoomServe. Like I remember it came down for a while, and then they put like another version up, and it wasn't like great. So then I think it was maybe like June 2000, if that's not the exact month, it's right around that time that CS Doom came out. It kind of came out of nowhere too. So Fly put out the CS Doom port, which basically took the version of ZDoom that we were using on DoomServe anyway, 1.22, and added this Quake World style client server, join anytime, leave anytime you want system, which really like opened up a lot of crazy stuff. So I remember when that came out, the servers were packed. Like you couldn't even get in them at all because I remember it was on the front page of Doom World, and I remember like a funny moment where I told people in the server that I was from Doom World and I wanted to get a picture of everybody all together. I think it maybe only supported like 8 players max, maybe 16. So it was either 8 or 16 people in the server, and I got them to all go outside on Doom 2 Map 1, and I was like, okay, say cheese, and they all typed cheese, and I just shot the BFG at all of them. So that's like something that'll always stick in my head. I don't know. I was an obnoxious little punk, but that was like I don't know, that was transformative to me. It took the game to like the next level where it was super accessible now, where you didn't have to kind of go through this front end to organize every game. All of a sudden, games could be bigger. Before it was mostly just one-on-ones, but now we're seeing these free-for-all death matches. It's just not something that really happened before that. So it was a pretty big moment, I think, and that actually kind of led me into making Unidoom become what it did. So I was using the UD tag a lot. So I just had a UD tag, but really nobody was kind of hanging out with me. But as I was playing CS Doom a little bit, like some people would be like, "Hey man, like what's UD? Can I like be in it or whatever?" And there might have been some people that came through that maybe put it on like that day and I never saw again. But eventually we get on IRC and I start meeting people like Death Warrior, who now known as Deathzor, and Liam. So, and everybody had different names back then too. So I don't know which names you want me to say, but everyone had different names back then. So I'm trying to remember all of them. But we kind of started getting together and we're like, hey, like, this is fun. We're playing every day. I mean, Deathzor lives in Australia, so he's 16 hours ahead. I couldn't wait to get home because our times would kind of align in a way that if I got home at 3 o'clock, he was kind of like waking up for the next day. So we would get like an hour or two where he would wake up early before school. I just got home from school. We could like play games and stuff together. We started making maps, and I ended up making one map that, well, I think I'm maybe getting a little bit ahead of myself. Why don't you ask me another question before I get into this? Unless you just want me to keep freestyling, because I'll just talk through the next 3
No,
hours. Or
totally. Keep going.
Okay, so I don't want to get it out of order because admittedly, and I will say this, I should have said this in the beginning. If I get any of these minute facts wrong, please don't hold it against me. I mean, it's been like 23 years of history that I'm trying to maintain here in my head, and I'm kind of just throwing it off the cuff. So it's
Well,
how
once you
I
lay it all
remember it.
out today, then you don't have to remember any of it ever again. So
Well, that's true, but someone will probably fact check me and be like, "Oh, well, you were wrong, Ralph." And that's okay. I'm going to do my best. So CS Doom. Let's talk about that first, and then we'll go back to the Unidoom thing. So CS Doom, it was awesome. I loved playing it. I was playing it constantly. At that time, we finally got broadband in our area, and we upgraded to cable in like around 2001, I want to say, like maybe about 6 months after it was out, and that was another moment where it was like, wow, the internet's so much better when you don't have to dial in and play, and everything was so fast, and people started getting it together, so more and more people were kind of playing from around the world with each other. Now, CS Doom was made by Fly, and there were some issues arising between him and his apprentice, who was known as Nightfang. And Nightfang was on IRC with me, and I was a young kid, and I liked him, and he was funny, and he was kind of lived like in a state next to mine, so I kind of related to him. And he put out this thing. It was the Black CS Doom launcher, and what the Black CS Doom launcher did was if you tried to connect to any server, it would crash the server. So if that happened nowadays, I feel like he would be immediately ostracized from the Doom community. But we were definitely still in like the internet Wild West phase at the time. So even though it was kind of bad, a lot of people were blaming Fly for not making his like program secure enough. And I think there was like a backdoor Archon where Fly could control anyone's server that he wanted, which Carnival later did too with Skulltag. It's just all sorts of crazy stuff happening back then, and that pretty much led to Fly kind of quitting CS Doom. So before Z-Damon, Nightfang was working on a fork called Doom Tournament, and I was kind of helping him with that. And it was CTF, basically. It was Capture the Flag introduced into Doom. And it never was actually released. I think like maybe only 4 or 5 of us played it. It was based off of that Zdoom 122 CS Doom build, and I was a kid, so I wasn't really good for much except for helping test and maybe like making some really bad resources that he probably told me were okay, but he was never going to use anyway. But that really didn't take shape. So when he put that Black CS Doom launcher out, he actually went under a name on the forums. It was Xdamon, and he had told me that he was thinking about like he was gonna fork it off and make it its own port, and he didn't really know what to call it. So I typed to him, well, why don't you just call it Xdamon? Because I thought it was kind of a cool name, but on the American QWERTY keyboard, the Z is next to the X, so I accidentally typed Zdamon. And so I said, why don't you just call it Zdamon? And I meant to say Xdamon, but he's like, oh, that's awesome. And that's how the name Zdamon actually came about. So Zdamon was named by like a 13-year-old kid accidentally, and it's still around today, 20 years later, which is pretty crazy. So Zdamon kind of comes into existence, and just by the virtue of the fact that I've kind of been tagging along with Nightfang at this point, he's like in his 20s, like a young programmer, and he's kind of disrupting the Doom scene with Zdamon, and I'm along for the ride and having fun, and I kind of get into forum moderation and stuff like that. Truth be told, I probably wasn't fit to be in those positions at that time.
How old were you at this point, by the way?
I'm 13 at this point.
Holy
yeah.
shit.
So I'm 13 at this point. I'm trying to act older. Yeah, I mean, I was definitely telling people on IRC that I was like 15 and 16 or whatever, just so that I seemed a little older and cooler. Yeah, I mean, I definitely remember lying about my age to like the Doom Room crew. But so I'm 13 at this point. I'm like kind of moderating forums a little bit. Now some other people are starting to come into the Zdamon community. There was a Doom2.net at the time and Doom2.org, which I think was run by Slayer, I want to say, which is long gone. I don't even know if that's on the Wayback Machine. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it isn't. But they were kind of focused on either speedrunning or multiplayer. So things were kind of, kicking up. It was like a new community kind of being built up. And at the time, truth be told, when I look back on it now, if somebody were to come into the Doom community now and they look at something like Doom World, they're going to think, wow, this is like, it's all single player WADs, and they're awesome. Like, we got crazy vanilla WADs, crazy boom WADs. We got all these crazy GZ Doom things. And I can't even call them WADs at this point, but back then, there wasn't, like, in the single player community, it was very rare for a Mega WAD to come out. Any Mega WAD that came out in 2001 was a big deal. It didn't even matter if it sucked. It was just like not something that happened very often. The tools were just a lot harder to use. It was just there weren't as many people around. It was a lot harder to get everything together. So whereas in multiplayer, things were just kind of moving so quick, it was super exciting. So I was drawn towards that instead of the single player side, where servers are going up and Nightfang is like, hey, the next version of Zdamon's coming out. Like, here's going to be the new features. And it might not be like a big crazy feature or anything, but at the time, like even a small thing seemed like really cool and epic, so to speak. So I kind of hung around there for a while, and now I'll go back to the Unidoom thing. So I had the Unidoom name I was using. I meet Deathzor and I meet Liam, and we kind of get our little IRC crew together. We got our own little group of young kids, basically, kind of parading around as these like multiplayer guys. And the older players that were better than us, I mean, they used to beat our ass when we would play competitively. So we would get our wins here and there, but we weren't like great players or anything yet. But we were messing around with mapping. And I remember I was going to make a skull tag WAD. Now, Skulltag had come out at this point. Carnival had also gotten client server into Skulltag. So Z-Daemon and Skulltag are kind of tracking on parallel paths at this point. Neither one have pulled ahead as like a clear favorite port of choice. Both kind of have their own little audiences. And they're at this point, they're still pretty small audiences. And I remember thinking Skulltag was cool because he added like a railgun and a grenade launcher. So I wanted to make a WAD called like Skulltag 2K2 or something. Dwango 2K2, that's what it was. Because I played like the 2K sports game. So yeah, we're going to do Dwango 2K2. And I took a Dwango 5 map 2 and I stripped it and retextured it with all these Skulltag textures. And I showed it to Deathzor and he was like, dude, this map's like awesome. And we put it on a server on Z-Daemon. I took out the Skulltag wads or weapons and we played around on it and we like had a lot of fun. So then he started making maps and then I was like, well, I'll make a couple more maps. And that's basically how we kind of got started mapping, which led to UDM1, which we released pretty quickly, I guess, relatively speaking. We released it on January 1st, 2002. Yeah, January 1st, 2002. And we had 16 maps in it, I want to think. Most of them me and Deathzor and Liam did one. And there weren't maps coming out at this point. That's like something that I don't think people would look back and know. There were no new maps for multiplayer coming out at all. Like there hadn't been any in years, at least that people were playing. And we put this WAD up and all these Z-Daemon people were like, oh my god, like new levels. This is amazing. Like we just want to play this constantly. So people were just constantly in the UDM1 server, which is pretty cool for like a 13 or 14-year-old kid at this point, which I'm becoming a little more arrogant. I'm like, yeah, look at this. Like I just made a couple maps and like now I've got the most popular server and so that made me just want to do more. And over the next few years our WADs will become a little bit more grandiose and a little more refined than the first one, but UDM1 will definitely always have a spot in my heart as being the beginning of mapping, even though it wasn't very refined in any way, but you can kind of just see the beginning ideas of like 13 and 14-year-old kids that are trying something new, and it was cool. It was definitely cool. And I don't know, were either of you guys around at that point?
Not yet.
Not me.
Not yet. But I mean, it's interesting because if you look at it from the perspective that you brought up, which was that no new WADs are coming out, and there's not a huge amount of people playing yet, because I think maybe we're still 2002. We're still like a year or two off from like what I consider is like the big boom of players showing up. I mean, yeah, those maps are pretty basic, but at the same time, you just didn't have anything, so there was almost like no frame of reference in a way. So yeah, it's really cool to see how you were able to take UDM1, and then like to me, I UDM2 was I think one of the first things I ever played, and I mean those maps there's such a progression in such a short period of time. It's just cool to see.
Yeah, I mean we were getting better quickly. And now, if you look back at like even UDM3 or maybe even UDMX now, compared to a lot of the stuff that's coming out today, it looks very simple. But in the context of the time, it wasn't. I mean, it was kind of, I feel like we were pushing the envelope. If you look at it in the context of what else was coming out in that scene at the time, which at first was nothing. And then what it ended up doing, actually, UDM1 and UDM2 kind of started creating this renaissance of maybe it isn't even a renaissance of multiplayer mapping, because I don't know that there was ever like a first era of like multiplayer mapping. People would make like deathmatch maps here and there, but there weren't like big deathmatch WADs, generally speaking. I think there were a couple TNT WADs.
Probably in like mid 90s. That's right. When some of them like Dweller and shit. That's the only period that got like a a serious production of DM words.
Right, and it's a desert up until
Yeah. Just a
about this
map
time.
here and there. The thing is, to put this into perspective, UDM one, UDM two, like what editors were you using? Like today, people think like, yeah, it's so easy, like to open Doom worlds. Doom editor or whatever. Doom builder. I got
Yeah,
this out.
Well, you
It's
you
gonna be the
still
same
use
in
the
ranked.
same editor today, don't you?
Yeah, Doom builder.
no, I don't. So at the time, well, I do use one of them today. I think. So at the time, the tools that I remember using, the mapping tool that I used for a long time was WadAuthor, and I think I used that up to like 2007. And WadAuthor, you built maps an entirely different way than you do in something like Doom Builder today. In Doom Builder, you get the blank canvas and you just start drawing lines. In WadAuthor, it was kind of odd. You would drop boxes. So instead of drawing a line, you'd have to drop at least a four-sided box, I think.
So it's
You could like,
sector based, basically.
yes, it was sector based, exactly. So I was just talking to someone about this recently. Like, you can see the difference between my work later and my work then, because something about that sector based mapping caused me to make rooms that were larger than I do now. So, in some ways, I have to try and train myself out of making smaller rooms when I'm drawing, where I'm trying to stay within like 128 or 256 units, or just trying to stay like perfectly on the grid. Back then, it was a lot more experimental. You're basically just making boxes and dragging them around. I would make huge rooms, and then I would add like platforms and stuff like that. So if you go back and you start looking at some of those maps from the early UDMs, even up through like UDM3, you can kind of tell that you're kind of making a room and then building stuff inside of it and then connecting it to other rooms. Whereas now, I feel like you're kind of building hallways and they might lead to like larger rooms. It was just a different mapping style, and that maybe is just something that was in my head, but that's how it was for me. The other tool that I used back then for lump management was Wintex, and it's a 16-bit program, and you had to get like special DLLs to get it to run. Well, maybe not on Windows 98, but on XP eventually you had to. And Wintex, in my opinion, is one of the greatest lump editors ever made. It has this really awesome feature where if you click on any sort of graphical lump, it'll open it in MS Paint with the palette loaded. So you can copy paste other graphics in, it'll automatically convert them to the Doom palette. You can basically edit anything. You can't accidentally add colors that are outside the palette. I don't know why any modern editor has not done that, because it's so much faster to work just like to pop open MS Paint and make fixes if you're not doing it in some sort of like independent texturing program. If a modern lump editor got that, and I've asked almost all of the lump editing programmers for it, if a modern one had that, I would switch right away. But because they don't, I actually keep a Windows XP VM just for loading Wintex, which I have open right now, I should say. So, yeah. But the tools were not very great, generally speaking. And I forget what Deathsword used. I think he might have used Deep Sea for mapping.
Ooh.
There were some weird people that were using all sorts of weird, I don't know. Maybe Wadded was one of them. I don't know. I don't think most people were using that. It was like DOS based. Just a lot of old stuff, and people were still figuring things out. So I don't think Doom Builder even came out till like the mid 2000s, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so basically, this means that all of these words were also hampered by primitive tools. Like it's almost magical to look at like today's mappers just building these epic maps,
Oh, it's
crazy
insane.
shit. But it just wasn't possible back then. It's just no way to even do it
It
with those primitive
was.
tools.
I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, it just was. It was just a different time, man. There was only one guy back then that was making crazy maps with. I don't know what editor he used. Maybe he used Deep or something, but Chris Lutz. he was putting out like crazy stuff.
Oh yeah. The Inferno and whatever other maps has he did. Yeah. He
Yeah, he did
really
Caverns
ornate
of
maps.
Darkness, I think, and I'm trying to remember what else he did. Maybe like I think there was like a Doom 1 themed map. Man, it's been 2 decades, so I'm really trying to reach in memory banks here. But I remember him being like so inspiring to me because I remember looking at these maps and thinking like, holy crap, I don't know how he did this. I don't think I can do it, but I can kind of start to try and copy what these great mappers are doing and learn from them. So there was definitely a lot of me trying to emulate single player mappers and then put that stuff into multiplayer maps at the time.
You may be thinking of Phobos Anomaly Reborn.
I think that's probably correct. Yeah, I think that's right. I think it was like a Doom 1 episode, if I recall. But anyway, he was just amazing. And I was always trying to push the envelope with whatever next release we did. Like UDM 2 was a marked improvement over UDM 1 in terms of the levels, and like we actually were playtesting, and we had people that were just like obsessed with, oh my god, when's UDM 2 coming out? So when UDM 2 came out, it was an event. It was like a big event. I think it was like March 2nd, 2003. I think it was my brother's birthday, and so it was like a year. It was like 14 months after the first one, and I remember it was like a big event at Z-Damon. The community was like so hyped up for it, and it was just really cool. So then when we did UDM 3, now at this point, things are kind of changing. Okay. Whereas UDM 1, we're kind of the upstart, plucky community members. Now, 2 years later, people like me and Deathsor are in positions of like authority in many ways, and um, people started listening to us, and on top of that, we started getting a lot better at playing Doom. 2 years before, we were getting our ass beat, but now I'm the one, whooping on a lot of people. I still lose games here and there, but generally speaking, I was winning a lot more than I'm losing at this point. So now there's kind of this aura in the community around UD, Unidoom, and we have like our little UD on top slogan, which we ripped off from another clan. We've actually made it popular, and yeah, there was this growing feeling that anything we do now, this is how I felt, was anything that we do now, we need to raise the bar every single time we do it. So UDM 3, we actually meet up with Alex Max at the time. He's kind of hanging out with us too. And we start mapping for UDM 3, and we're like super like on top of what we're doing. We're thinking these maps are like so great. Like I said, if you look back at them now, it's like whatever. It's just like some random deathmatch maps. But at the time, I'm telling you, there wasn't a lot out there like it. So I remember one thing I wanted to do, I was very adamant about, and this is it goes back to what I was saying about me being influenced by the single player mappers, because the multiplayer mappers didn't see what was going on with the single player maps. And one thing I saw was that some WADs were using these custom palettes. So I wanted to bring that over to a multiplayer WAD. It had never been done, to my knowledge. So in UDM 3, we had edited the palette. I kind of was messing around with the blues and the greens, and still today, I mean, people call it like the UDM 3 blue. It was.
Oh yeah, that's very distinctive.
Yeah. So we were always just trying to do new stuff, and we definitely influenced people too, because if you look at there was another mapper who also we let map in UDM 2 on some guest maps. His name was Chrono, and he put out the Last Stand deathmatch, which is TLS, which
Yep.
basically, if you look at the style of TLS, it's pretty much modeled after a couple of UDM 1 maps. Like the style is lifted directly out of UDM 1 and into this style, which he also kind of used in the UDM 2 maps that he made. So there was a lot of influence going on from the WADs. and that felt good. It felt good. I mean, we kind of had like fans that were making WADs based around what we were doing. So yeah, I felt like we were kind of pushing things forward there. And then I guess at the same time, so the Z Daemon was kind of going through some changes, and I'm not really sure how to start this discussion because there's a couple different things going on here. But
Well, there was
go
something
ahead.
that I wanted to touch on actually, which
Yeah.
so UDM2 of course comes out 2003, and at this time there wasn't any capture the flag. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
anywhere. And so
No.
I joined. I think I started playing probably like a month or two after that, and so UDM2 was just on every server. UDM2 and Dwango 5, and it's people were playing Team Deathmatch, FFA, and that was pretty much it. And then 2004 rolls around, and that's when CTF comes out. And I think CTF, we've talked about this a lot, but CTF changed everything, and it basically it changed, I think, the way that it just changed the way that people played, and so UD became, for me, for someone who was not in UD at that time. I was looking at you guys, and I was only 12 or something, and I mean, you guys were, you guys were awesome, and watching, all these CTF clan wars that came out of just having a new game mode, and the big USA versus Europe thing. I think the community basically exploded around that time, and so it just became like all of a sudden there were like 15 to 20 clans just coming up out of nowhere. And so with you and Deathzor kind of in those positions of authority, obviously I think people gravitated towards UD because, oh wow, here's this clan with these guys who they're moderators on the forum, and they made UDM1 and UDM2, and they're actually good players. And along with that actually came the first Z-Daemon CTF map pack, which had a map from you, which is probably being played right now. So I think it was just, you're right. It was kind of a changing time because everything just went like like all of a sudden, and that definitely influenced the community, and it definitely influenced UDM3 because if I recall correctly, there was a lot of testing going on for UDM3, and there were a lot of people involved in playing that. So I think that
Yeah.
was
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty much every single day until we released it at like Christmas 2004, I think. I think there was like a lot of maps we threw out, and we were just trying new things and just messing around. We wanted to put out something that was good. And like I said, I'm glad you brought this up because I didn't know which way to go because at the time, Z Daemon's administration was changing as well. And I'm going to touch on that in a moment because that actually was a little bit prior to CTF coming in. But so somebody comes in and programs CTF into Z Daemon. Now, Z Daemon did exist in Skulltag, but the difference was that in Skulltag, to make a CTF map, you had to do all sorts of complicated ACS scripting, and it was not accessible to like a normal person. I think all the maps were just kind of default stock Skulltag maps made by Boris, and they were like fine, but it just wasn't easy to make these maps. So Z Daemon, the implementation there was that at the time, before it was standardized later, you just would drop like a red and a blue key in the map, and that would turn into the flag. It made it way more easy for a regular person to just turn any single map they wanted into a CTF map. So we knew that it was coming out. It had not been out yet. So because we were kind of in with the administration and whatever, we were kind of working in parallel with them and I should say that Alex Max was actually leading this project. So Alex was in charge of ZDCTF, and I did put a map in. He had a few maps. There were a couple maps from some other people, but me and Alex were UD, and we kind of had the inside track to work on this WAD before the final version of CTF came out officially. So that we were able to put it out simultaneously with this release. Those maps are very interesting because that first ZDCTF MP WAD, the map pack, there's some, like you said, a lot of maps that are still kind of getting played today. Alex's map 8, something epic. I mean, that was just in the WDL finals last summer in 2020. I mean, that map is 14 years old probably. So it's just, and actually map 4 was in the beginning of the season. So these maps that are going on 2 decades eventually are still getting a lot of play. And it's pretty crazy to me that they stuck around. But I guess if I could wax philosophical for a second about mapping, and I kind of was talking about this with you in private recently, where there's kind of these different schools of thought on mapping, and some people just like really tweak everything as much as they can to try and make their map perfect, play how they intend to make it perfect. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's just like a style of mapping, like the way you want to approach it. But for me, whether it's with the ZDM and CTF map that I made or most of my UDM maps, a lot of it is I'm going to make something that I think will play cool, but I'm not going to necessarily overanalyze it because I know that once players get into the map, they're going to figure out cool ways to use the map that I never could imagine doing. And I think that's a cool philosophy to take, if only because, for instance, if you look at Alex Max's ZDM and CTF map 8, something epic, which is still one of the most played WADs. If you go back and look at it in the context of the time that it came out, people playing Capture the Flag back then, they were not rocket jumping. They were not doing all these crazy things. They're pretty much just running back and forth to the bases, just shooting each other. They might not even had mouse look or jumped or anything. The way that it's played now, it looks like an entirely different game. It's actually insane. And
I would say I will interrupt you in this.
Yeah,
That map 8 is actually the CTF equivalent of Doom 2 map 1 in deathmatch. Like, the bugs, the extra features, the like map 1 wouldn't work without the bugs. Map 8 wouldn't work without these unthought of rocket jumps.
right.
It's sort of like this is what gave it like the second life.
Oh, absolutely. And people still come up with new tricks. I mean, it's not even just the rocket jumps. There's all sorts of trick jumps that you can make from like the rocket platform up into the top of the base, which was definitely never intended. Actually, you could tell from the way that Alex mapped it that you weren't supposed to be able to do that. The slopes were supposed to be too steep for you to get up, but people figured out how to do it. And even my own map.
You can even like jump up from the slopes for like 5 health.
Yep. Yeah, you can do a rocket jump up for almost no damage. It's incredible. People are doing all sorts of things on that map that it was never designed for. Alex, me, nobody at the time could have ever envisioned that map being played the way it is now. We could have never envisioned CTF or Doom being played the way it is
And now. I mean, yeah, this is the progression. Like when map 8 was when I started playing, map 8 was becoming popular because of the rocket jumps. But the rocket jumps were like the hefty rocket jumps from the flag room that you just rocketed yourself in the face for 90 health. And then you
hope that you can burn everybody pretty much.
Yeah, it was just like, I'm sacrificing my health for the escape plan. But now it's like you can't let a runner inside of the base with 20 health because they will heal a bit and then they will use just 15 health for getting out. And it's insane. That's just like an incredible progression of abusing all of the tiny tricks and manipulating all of the quirks of the engine. And
absolutely. It's nobody could have envisioned it. And really, when I think of it, kind of when I think of the maps that are being played then, to what's being played now, there's definitely been a transformation from this kind of brute force Doom, just frag constantly, into this finesse trick play of like high octane runners and excitement, trying to avoid conflict as much as possible. It's a total flip from what it was when Capture the Flag started, because you have to remember, Capture the Flag came out in 2004. The people that were playing it were heavy hitting deathmatch and duel players. There was nobody had dedicated their time to learning how to do all these running tricks. Everybody had dedicated the last 2 to 4 years of just becoming fragging machines. So, like for instance, Bones mentioned that the first USA versus Europe Ctf match, which I was fortunate enough to play in. My partner, Ace of Spades, we were both in UD. We pretty much prided ourselves on defense. UD's thing in CTF was defense. Like,
Yep.
you're not going to score on us ever.
And I was the runner.
Was this
Right.
was this US versus Europe, or was this the famous US versus CZ?
No, this was US versus Europe.
There were two. There were
This
two
is
of
the
those
first one
matches.
ever.
Yeah. In
It's very
2004,
one-sided.
there was USA versus Europe, which had, I think, you, Ace, some of the DUI guys, right?
Yep. It was the Triforce and the OS guys,
Right.
I think.
And that was
Yeah.
that was really early on in CTF. And then later that summer they had USA versus Europe 2, which I played in, because it didn't have any of like the any of the UD or DUI guys. It was kind of like I guess you could call us like the lower tiered players at that point, And so like you guys dominated the first one and we lost the second one. So yeah, the USA versus CZ came like 2 or 3 years later, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I remember the second one taking place. I remember that I wasn't a part of it.
Yeah.
I just remember the first one, and me and Ace's jobs were to defend, and we gave up one flag. We won 50-1 on the US servers, so we were working hard. But I mean, it's just the way that the American players, at least, I mean, really all the players, because the Europeans weren't any different. They were playing the same maps that we were. They were just playing in Europe. But people were just a lot better duelers and fraggers back then, I feel like. Whereas nowadays, there's a lot more focus on kind of movement and stuff like that.
Oh, definitely. Like the nitty gritty of the just escaping, because why would you need to frag the defender 4 times in a row when you can just sort of sneak out?
Yeah, and over time, I adapted my style as a player to that. But just in the beginning, UD was a defense clan. We were defense first. We didn't care who ran for us. We would give you like 10 full minutes to score one flag. We just weren't giving any up.
Well, I mean, you look at the maps too. Like, so CTF Map 8, I have distinct memories of playing that like 8v8, and like somebody gets a flag out and you think it's the greatest thing that ever happened, and then you can't even imagine doing that now because they weren't using mouse look or anything. And then even ZD-CTF Map 6, where that's just people
Cursed.
played that. I played that in USA versus Europe too. I mean, that was a map that people played competitively, and now you'd look at it and you're like, why? So yeah, I mean the maps were geared more towards heavy fragging, whereas now it's gone so much further than that.
Well, I think people didn't know how the game played really at that point either. Like pretty much it was just experimentation. ZDCTF was a lot of luck involved in how those maps came out and played, I think.
Oh yeah, it's just some of these maps worked, some of them did not. And at like the moment they were created, no one had any sort of idea how it will play out later. Because like the entire mode just took off into a much more refined, area than anyone could have expected. So like you couldn't have mapped for that, like all of these rocket jumps and everything. Like for long years, ZDCTF actually had all those those sector bugs where
Mhm.
some of those sectors didn't weren't built properly, so you couldn't even rocket jump in them because like it didn't connect. They were built like wrongly in the Doom build, the node building process.
Mhm.
So
Oh yeah, where it would
yeah,
just not even do anything when you would shoot the floor in certain
like you had
spots.
imbalanced maps. Like map 11 was imbalanced because you couldn't rocket jump the same on both sides.
Right. Yeah, it was definitely more experimental back then, and I think part of the reason that CTF blew up so much was kind of, I think that the clan scene at the time helped it a lot. So it was a very top heavy clan scene, right? Before CTF came out, clan wars, I'm air quoting that, like they were duels. It was like a series of duels and maybe a team deathmatch, maybe,
Do you feel
but usually duels.
do you feel old explaining what clan wars are?
Um, I don't know.
Because
This whole
these
story is like I
days,
start out as 12 or 11 and I end up old. So yeah, I don't know. It was definitely different. Clan wars were a lot different. So you would have, it was pretty much a series of duels. You would put your best duelers against their best duelers, and whoever won like that duel series won the clan war. So the clans at the time, at this point, UD has become one of the top clans. The other top clans are probably OS with Urhash and Firestorm and a couple of those guys, which OS was old schoolers, and DUI was the other big one. So, and maybe Bones, you can give your perspective because you were kind of like a young kid, so maybe you look at this a certain way. But when I look back, I think of the two top clans at the time were UD and DUI, and both clans were constantly trying to out recruit each other to get the best players at that point because we really hated each other so much. I mean, we've really hated each other a lot. Like I would be sitting at school thinking about how I can't wait to go home and just like try and beat down any DUI player I could find in a server possible. So we really didn't like each other. But I think that competitiveness between us, plus the fact that we were both kind of hooked up with the ZDM administration still at this point, and that we had so many players in our clans, kind of pushed CTF where it was constantly happening. It was like constantly leading to like, when's UD going to run into DUI on the server? So the servers were always kind of full. There were always pubs going on. I know DUI would like just bring 8 people into a server at once and just start like beating on random people, and then we would show up and like, start playing against them, and one of us would start winning or losing, and then like the other team would leave or whatever. But well, how do you remember that as a kid? I guess.
No, you're right. It was definitely UD and DUI. I mean, I bounced around in so many clans. Like I'm sure you remember LG. I was like 10 or 11, and one of
That
their
Tenchu? No,
say
that's
that
LF.
again.
Never mind.
Uh,
Sorry.
uh,
I just so many clans back then.
there were, and so I'm not sure the story is relevant, but I remember them saying like, "Oh, you have to be English, to join." And I was like, "Well, I speak
Hmm.
English," but they meant you had to be from England, and so there were just a ton of clans. I bounced around in a lot of the not so great ones because uh, I think. I mean, at that time, DUI was only letting people in that had actually played on Dwango servers in the 90s. Um,
Well,
and
that's what they
so
said.
that's what they said. I mean, later on that year, I think they started to get a little looser on that because somehow I found myself like hanging out with you guys, and I had asked to join DUI at one point, and that's the story they told me. And then once I joined you, I got like a couple different messages from people like, "Hey, you should join DUI instead." So there was like this huge rivalry, and I remember the big game being, I think it was you, Deathzor, Ace, and Russell, who is
Mm.
not a competitive player at all.
No, not at all. I remember this run in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you guys played a clan war again, air quotes, maybe a little, maybe one hand air quotes,
Uh-huh.
and like against their best players in CTF, and you guys actually won. And the thing about Russell is, again, not a competitive player, but also lives in fucking New Zealand, and he was playing
Yeah.
on some server in like Texas or
That's where
something.
lived in Australia. So
Yeah,
half our team was down there. Yeah.
and I know that you guys rubbed that in their faces a lot, as long as you could. But I just think like, right, both guys or both clans were like really trying to get involved in how things were running in the community, and you were kind of the established clan, and they were just coming in, and like, I don't know, I guess for lack of like a better explanation, they just had people that were older and not young stupid kids, and UD had been around for a while, so it was like the only two clans with people that more or less had brain activity. So it was just like natural that you guys would go up against each other. But it was huge that whole year, and probably the year after that too. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely just the UD and DUI show. It was fun to watch and be a part of.
Yeah, it was exciting. I mean, the internet was just a different place back then. It was the age of the forum and the age of the like the flame war, and there was so many different moving parts that just exacerbated the whole thing. So, like number one, um, I mean, like we were just we were saying a lot of nasty stuff to each other. With nowadays, both clans would be just totally canceled. But like we were just saying nasty things to each other. We were on the forums constantly picking at each other. Now the Z, now I'm going to go back to what I was going to go into before, which is that the Z-Damon team itself is kind of undergoing a transition at this point. So I think like 2003, Night Fang decides that he's going to hang it up. He's going to move on from Z-Damon and go work on his own games, and he's going to hand it over. So you got the UD guys like me and Russell that have been kind of riding with him for years. We wanted him to give Z-Damon to us, and he gave it to Raider, who was a well-known and trusted server host who had like some sort of experience, hosting like a website or something. So he thought that it would be best to give it to him. At the time, we liked Raider. I think he even like tagged as UD Raider or whatever. So Raider was kind of like our guy, but also then the DUI guys were kind of making friends with all of them and like swaying their opinions. There was like a lot of weird like political stuff happening too, which was, truth be told, it was part of the excitement as well because you're doing like some Game of Thrones shit with Doom, but that was like exacerbating things too because there was like a background struggle for power where we felt like we helped build Z-Damon, and I guess I'm speaking for everybody here, but I mean like there was a lot of us like me, Russell, Alex, Deathzor, all these guys that have been in Z-Damons for like the last 3 or 4 years. We feel like we helped get Z-Damon where it is, where it used to have 0 players on the servers, and we were helping out constantly, and now the servers are packed, and we're kind of losing influence now. So things started getting kind of weird, and then it made us really dislike DUI, and DUI really hated us too because they clearly wanted to get that influence. So there was a lot of like weird political shit happening that caused this to be exacerbated, and then they just started like picking up every good player they could. So then we started picking up every good player we could, and at this point, this is when UD went from. I mean, we were a pretty tight knit group. We only had like 5 or 6 people, and then we just started adding it was just an arms race. It was just crazy. So it was pretty wild. I don't know. I don't know how else to say it. Any other questions from that time? Because I mean, we could do 5 hours on that year alone, I think.
Well, it's before my time, so I can't really like divine into this?
Well, I know that. So shortly after that, okay, there's all this stuff going on in the community. UDM3 comes out late 2004,
Yep.
and then we had some problems leading into 2005, where I think things kind of reached a point where you guys and UD really were just looking to. I'm trying to word this in such a exit the community and do your own thing. So how does that how does that transition into
demon
Odamex?
troubles.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess this is an opportunity to clear up a lot of misconceptions from that time that some players have I've heard expressed in the past, which is that Odamex was created because UD got banned from Z-Daemon. Actually, not even close to true at all. So it was pretty clear that we had lost our influence in Z-Daemon, which we felt, that we had a personal stake in it. I mean, we just helped build this thing up for years, and now it's kind of being taken away from us. Raider doesn't. He's getting rid of the UD mods, and the DUI guys are all becoming mods, and Kilgore's now kind of in place, kind of doing the programming, and I think when they closed the source of Z-Daemon, I don't know the exact date, but it's got to be around that time, because that was what led to us kind of putting together the precursor idea to Odamex.
Oh yeah. By the way, let's just explain this. Basically, the demon was licensed under the Doom source license, which is what Carmack originally released the code as, which allowed the code to be closed.
Yes.
Which is basically so yeah, let's just because like they closed the source code, we need to explain that it actually was legal from the standpoint from the licensing that Carmack released the code with.
Yes. So here was,
but it's obviously controversial because it's kind of a dick move.
No, it was like a total move for control. We looked at it as like,
as far as I like,
here's
the idea was that it's security through obscurity.
Yes,
but that's a pretty well debunked.
Well, there were hacks out for it like almost immediately.
Yeah.
The thing is, I can't speak for everybody else, but here's how I looked at it. Okay, I had pretty much spent years helping Nightfang build Z-Daemon up, right? I wasn't a programmer, but I'm doing everything I can community-wise, trying to get word out there. Z-Daemon is better than Skulltag. We're the place to be. And he kind of gives it away to these guys, and the source is still open. Now, what does that bring us? It brings us awesome stuff like Capture the Flag. If the source was closed, we would never have gotten it, at least in the way that we did. The entire course of Doom multiplayer history has changed if that source is closed a year earlier. So, all of a sudden, Kilgore takes over the project. They decide that they're going to close the source, and they're saying that they can do it because of the Doom source license. Well, I also believe that I believe that Nightfang said that his code was GPL. And I remember that being like a weird point where it was like, well, it's incompatible with the DSL. So it just seemed weird for someone else to come along and close the source of somebody else's work that had put all the important work into that point, And that didn't sit well with a lot of us. And truth be told, we were kind of a little bit of zealots for like the GPL thing. That was kind of like real big on the Doom World side at that time. Like, hey, GPL or die, basically. And so we were like, well, okay, we're going to see what we can do with our own thing. So at that point, people that had been around Z-Daemon building it, me, Russell, Toke, Mank was involved. who else was involved? Alex Max was involved. And then there was a lot of other people that came in from outside of ZDM and that helped us, like Sam from Legacy and then later Eternity. He helped us. We had some other people, but basically what happened was we said, okay, we can kind of see the writing on the wall. This really isn't like our engine anymore. It's not like the community engine. It's theirs now. They're controlling everything. You have to go onto their launcher to use it. You have to go onto their servers. We want to make sure that we're not going to get into a situation where we're screwed and like we don't have any say in it. So we kind of start kicking around these ideas of starting our own little port. And of course, like, so there's like a lot of idea guy moments, especially like for me, because I wasn't a programmer or anything, but we're just trying to get the resources and the team together to push forward another multiplayer engine. So we start like kicking around like fake names and stuff. We come up with Zwango because every like engine had to have like a Z at the beginning. So instead of Dwango, we just put a Z, Zwango. And I remember we put out like these like random promos for like a couple months. It was just like Zwango is coming, and it kind of became before people called them like a meme. It was basically like a multiplayer community meme where people would just say like Zwango is coming, or they'd like post images or like whatever. Like I remember one was somebody took like a picture of the Earth and laid like the Megasphere head over it. It was just like Zwango is coming. So I don't know. It was just it was kind of funny. And I will say one thing that we were good at in UD was pushing a narrative or pushing a like an idea. Like we were really good at that. if nothing else, we could definitely push ideas at the time. So we were very effective at like getting this Zwango idea out there. And then, we start getting some programmers. Dennis was our first like lead programmer from Russia. He kind of just like showed up and started helping us. So we had a lot of hurdles to deal with. So first, what is the base of the engine we're going to use? Well, we could try to use the ZDaemon 1.6 source or whatever the last one available was. But what we found, like me and Toke and Deathsor, I remember, we were like, okay, CS Doom 0.62, which wasn't even like the last version of it, feels like amazing online at high pings for whatever reason. Like we didn't know why. We probably didn't have any justification for it, but we just remembered that it felt great for someone from Australia to play with someone from the United States on that version of CS Doom. It was really old. Wasn't even the last version of CS Doom. But we also were like, well, it's kind of an early version, so it doesn't have all this extra like bloat in it from like the later Z Dooms. Why don't we use that as a base? Now, we had to do a couple things though, because it also wasn't so Fly's code was GPL, but then the ZDoom source wasn't. Again, like this, the licensing stuff back then was real weird. So we got permission from Randy Height, the ZDoom programmer, to GPL all the code in that old version of ZDoom. So now that we had that and we had the Fly stuff, we had to strip out like pretty much all Heretic and Hexen stuff because the sources for those games had not been released yet, or they weren't GPL at the very least. So we spent so much time stripping them.
The Raven games were actually only GPL'd in like 2012.
It was after we did it. It would have made our lives a lot easier. Because
it came sort of like, I think it was like Gez was the guy who pushed that, like he's initiative of him doing that for some reason, like but that comes a decade later.
Yeah, so it was I remember we had our SVN set up to output to IRC, and it was just constant, like all day. It was just like Som, and I think Fraggle was helping us early on. And oh man, there was just like there was like dozens and dozens of commits happening. So it was a lot of work, but you know what? Like it actually ended up kind of cleaning up parts of the code base, I think, because it stripped all that hexen and heretic stuff out, so that when it's brought back later, it's maybe brought back in a little bit more sanely. But that engine was stripped down, man. It was really stripped down. So the early versions of Odamex were rough, but we had it playing online, and we were feeling really good about it. So in the meantime, I'm still playing on Z-Daemon because Odamex isn't ready for prime time yet or anything. And UD pretty much gets banned entirely from Z-Daemon by like 2006. There's all sorts of things happening. I don't even know which ones I should go into.
Okay. Let me try to narrate this from a neutral point, right? So, get what, right? This is the issue we're talking about right now.
That's like the final issue, yeah.
Yeah. This is like okay. So there was probably a lot of bad blood boiling over for months and months. But like the final issue we're talking about is the get what issue, which is that basically get what is a tool of the daemon, like a subtool that allows you to search for words from its clients, and this utility allowed you to also search for iWords. So you could essentially download Doom2.wat or any other commercial product because a Google search was included. And
Correct.
It was super easy to find Google hits for commercial iWords back then. This is, of course, not the issue now because Google cleaned up their search hits, basically. But back then, it was anyone's fairground. So basically, you objected to this. And
yes, I was one of many objectors, I would say.
And when you brought this up with Todd Hollandshead, who was the head of id Software's, what was his role? Sorry,
he was man, I don't even remember his role, but I think he was just like the president, maybe, of the company at the time.
Yeah, sort of like the head honcho of the public relations, something like that.
Yeah, I basically reached out to him because I knew that he would email me.
Yeah, he was the guy to contact.
I wasn't going to reach out to Carmack or something.
Yeah, because what the fuck Carmack does.
Yeah.
It blew up, and basically the Z-Daemon administration took this as a personal attack, and they basically started banning UD people because they thought of it as an act of malice.
Yeah.
So without judging any of the sides in this dispute, let's move to what it actually followed into.
Well, wait, can I go back and talk about that for a second?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just want to say,
I'm not trying to muzzle you.
Yeah, okay. I mean, this is like ancient history. I'm still banned from Z-Daemon as far as I know, but here's the thing. It wasn't like we were just like, hey, let's contact id Software and get Z-Daemon in trouble. No, that wasn't it at all. We kept asking them for a long time. We said, hey, Kilgore, why don't you make the launcher GitWad which is an awesome utility. It's like a super awesome idea. It was a game changer. GitWad was great, but why don't you just build it in so that it just doesn't search for
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Doom2.zip
There
and
was an
Doom.zip?
entire debate
And
around if it's like moral to block a simple search string. Like it's just
well,
googling Doom to what in Google, right? Yeah.
that was what they're saying. But I mean,
Yeah.
any reasonable person would see that the point was, and probably it worked because there was a lot of players back then. But the point was that you're going to download ZDaemon and it's going to download Doom for you, so you don't have to worry about it. Just download ZDaemon,
Oh
and a
yeah.
reasonable person's going to see that, hey, it downloads the games for me. I don't need to buy them. It's just going to
Oh,
work out of the box.
dude,
And
you absolutely know it that anyone in Eastern Europe was like, yeah, yeah, I love this feature.
yeah, of course they did. And Gitwad is like a great. It was a one of the better, maybe one of the best
No, I
tools
mean
for
the iWord
multiplayer.
downloading feature.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying like that part of it, like it would have been an easy fix. It would have just been like a
Right.
2 minute discussion. But there was this constant fight, like, well, maybe you should talk to Google instead of us. Well, it's like, well, you're a Doom a program that runs Doom. Like your program is specifically for running Doom, and like you're pretty much implicitly, at the very least, like giving it out for free so that people will play on ZDaemon. So why don't you just make it block those? And he said,
Oh,
well, there's nothing that we're doing that's illegal, and like it doesn't violate like the Doom end user
and
license.
we should
I
just
think that
also
phrase. Hold on, let me just finish this
mention.
part
No, I mean,
because
like, do you realize how old internet this is?
yeah, it is. It's stupid. It was stupid at the time. It should have
This
been
would get
handled pretty quick, but
CND in minutes
yes,
nowadays.
absolutely. And that wasn't the intention when I reached out to him. Basically, it was a chicken match where Kilgore was like, well, prove it. Prove that someone thinks that it's not right. So when I reached out to Id and Todd Hollinshead, or Hollinshead, however you would say his name, um, it wasn't because I was like trying to get the CIA sent to Kilgore's house. No, it was because I wanted to just prove to him that, hey, I don't think the id would agree with you. They're just not going to agree with you. So I reached out. I asked them. So we got banned, but I think also all of a sudden it stopped downloading the iWads after that. So I'm not sure what happened with all that. So yeah, so I was banned. Pretty much anyone that was associated with me was banned. Anyone that even like thought about me probably was very close to being banned.
I will say that
Yes.
I was already there when this entire kerfuffle was happening. So I have to say that some of those bans were deliberate. Like some of the people provoked the bans. Like they were, yeah,
Oh,
like
they did.
I stand with Ralphis, ban me.
Yes.
It kind of grew into something that, like, yeah, we can discuss about the origins, but then it became a movement. And then some people were like, it sort of like created this weird split where a lot of the American community sort of moved away or sort of like went into the underground, and basically what it led to was that basically in like the years 2000, maybe 6 to
7.
10 or
Yeah,
something like
6.
that, the European community on Demon sort of like thrived because it was completely dominant.
Well, right,
Well,
and
you're welcome.
it created a weird, you know, because there were a lot of people and there were a lot of UD people, but because UD cast such a wide net, I mean, they had the IRC channel was huge. They had friends, people all
Oh
over the
yeah.
place. That, like you said, they would say, "I'm not playing because Ralph is banned," and it just created this weird situation for. I almost feel like I'm kind of unique in this situation, which was that I was an established member of UD, but also a staff member on ZDaemon, and it was like this weird line that I had to try not to cross on either side, and it was just you look back on it now, like it seemed like it was happening forever, but if you look back on it now, it was like, man, that was 15 years ago, and it happened for like a year-long period of time, and like it really wasn't that big of a deal. Like sitting here now, obviously it was a big deal then, but it's silly. It just all seems so ridiculous, especially as we've gotten older.
Yeah, but it's also part of the history, and
It's true.
you know, those decisions at the crossroads of history, they matter. Like
Right.
some of
So
those were
right.
pretty important actually for the entire evolution of the entire environment of the multiplayer scene.
Well, and I'll
So
do
to
you one
speak.
better. I'll connect the dots because Ralph gets banned, and the thing about ZDaemon was you could have private servers, and the private servers, the ones that were not listed on the master server, were not required to follow the master ban list. So I'll let Ralph take it from here, but that led into what you decided to do with CTF that kind of changed the whole scene all over again.
Yeah, so even before I get into that, there's kind of some other precursors going on in the background, which kind of goes back to the Odamex thing, right? So all this is leading up. Yeah, we're fighting with the ZDaemon guys, and some of us are ready to roll out of there. Well, it should be noted that in the background, we were getting pretty confident that Odamex was going to be releasable for the first version within the next few months, right? Because we had already kind of been having war of words with the ZDaemon administration for at least a year at this point, and we're kind of getting to fall 2006 when that happened, I think, off the top of my head. And we released the first version of Odamex in 2007 January. So we're only like 4 months out. We're kind of teasing that this thing's coming. I think there was like Odamex is coming posts on ZDaemon at the time. And I think before like you got banned because nobody knew what it was yet.
Right.
So,
it was just a funny
yeah,
campaign.
just a meme,
Yeah.
right? Is this that was something that we were very good at, and so everyone was saying like Odamex is coming, Odamex is coming. So my thought at the time was, okay, well now I'm banned. That sucks. I'll probably get unbanned. I was wrong on that, but even if I don't, we're gonna have Odamex ready to go. It's gonna have CTF out of the box. Like we can probably kind of start hopefully moving people over, and we had like verbal commitments from a lot of people, like the OS guys who were a pretty influential clan. They're like, look, we're gonna stand with you. Like when Odamex comes out, we're gonna do whatever we can to make sure that it's successful. And so we're not to Odamex yet. We're still in 2006. So I still kind of want to play, and we have this network of people, and a lot of people are getting banned now because of what happened, and people just kind of want to play. So I kind of come up with this idea. I'm really big into like sports in the NFL at the time. So what if we had a Doom CTF league, a team-based game, and we run it kind of almost exactly like the NFL or something like that? We'll have a draft of some sort where teams are kind of selected instead of signing up. Up to this point, there was no such thing as like a draft league in Doom. Everybody would sign up with their team, usually their clan mates, to join some sort of tournament. Well, what if we kind of break that down, and now people from all these different clans kind of get mixed together to kind of see who the best is, right? And that was kind of the concept. And I remember working with you, Human Bones, at the time, kind of when I was bouncing ideas around. And I think Chain Dude, I was kind of bouncing ideas off him, and he was hosting the server for us the first season. And I want to say there was maybe someone else, but I don't actually recall who. I feel like there was a third
Fastidious.
person. Was he around yet? I don't know if he was even around to the second season. But anyway, the first season was a little bit bootstrappy for sure. But it kind of, we started it in the winter of 2007. We were getting it ready I was kicking the idea around through 2006, and I was like, well, I'll wait till after Christmas, and then we can start this up. And we played with 8 teams, and they were definitely not the prettiest CTF games ever. But as a proof of concept, I thought it actually ended up pretty well, and so did a lot of other people. I think because number one, it seemed to generate a lot of attention and excitement. Like people were watching games that weren't even in the league, and they were just like, "Oh yeah, like I can't wait to see who's going to win these games," because you're seeing these groups of people that have never played together before. Usually, people that didn't even like each other. Sometimes now they're forced to play on the same team, and this bad blood between clans. I guess we should mention that coming into this point, yes, in the mid 2000s, UD and DUI were the top clans, but by now you've got clans like Sin and I don't know what were some of the other clans.
DX.
DX comes around for sure. DX is a huge part of that, and so now there's other pretty good players, and all the clans pretty much kind of hate each other. If you're not, it's very tribal. So if you're not wearing the same tag, you pretty much hate anybody in the other clans for the most part. But so we kind of pull the main players together from these clans, and now we're kind of mixing all these people, and you start finding out that, hey, you know what? Like I actually kind of get along with these people from the other clan. So now everyone kind of starts becoming friends over time. Didn't quite happen overnight, but it's definitely got there, over the course of whatever 10 years. But the first season was pretty rough.
Do you think in the long run that basically IDL destroyed the clan scene?
Yes.
Yes, because I also think so. That is like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
It just made clans obsolete.
It destroyed them. One thing that I think sucks, and I don't know, and you'd probably be a better authority on this, and I've thought about this in the past, like there used to be a really vibrant European scene, and I feel like there was a lot of clans in Europe. I feel like they just all disappeared. They didn't come with us to the IDL. I mean, we had European players, but not like what was around, and I don't know where they all went. Never figured it out.
I think it's basically the same story. Like as you said, like there were clans there was a vibrant clan scene in America, and then it disappeared, and IDL basically dismantled it. And on the European side, this same clan scene hang up for a couple of years because we had like clan competitions instead of draft based ones, and then we started also implementing draft based competitions, and European players started joining IDL, and that basically led to clans being less and less prominent, or even
so IDL killed Europe Doom.
Yep.
I guess too.
Yeah.
I want to
Well,
say
I guess
that.
that's something I regret,
but I want to say that part of it though had to do with the fact that versions of ZDaemon and other ports really weren't great at handling high ping. And so, because the IDL was US servers, the idea of a European actually winning a Master Bowl or a championship or whatever was like kind of unheard of for 8-9 seasons. I mean, it was that steeped in American players.
We basically we were like, okay, we were having our sort of fun in Europe, and we also were like, okay, let's try to join on this fun they're having over in America, because IDL was honestly it was awesome, like the entire spectacle of it. Like we didn't have anything like that. We had the Vendetta tournaments, which were cool, but sort of like, the clan-based thing is limiting it. meanwhile, this were the IDL format was challenging every player. Like, it wasn't about the clan. Like, you couldn't be carried in IDL. Like, it was about, like, you had to prove yourself to a team that would draft you. So yeah, this was pretty sexy. So that's why, like, Europeans really started joining IDL and mass, at least the ones that were active and wanting to prove themselves. So basically, this sort of like osmosis of European players started weakening the European scene, and sort of like, yeah, IDL became the center of competitiveness, and that's when you saw like the best clans of the time, which was basically everyone in Chaos, the French clan, and everyone in, well, DH or CI or whatever, the European clans. Everyone would start like signing up for IDL and trying to prove their worth in IDL.
It was definitely an interesting time. I'll say that. It was I mean, we were learning a lot. Every season we were trying to get better. It's not easy running these leagues. It's gotten easier now, but in the beginning, we're kind of trying to figure everything out, and everyone's like, "Oh, well, we need to change this, we got to change that," but you got to kind of look at the decisions like, okay, we can't do like giant paradigm shifts every season, because part of the appeal here is that like it's a stable format. Like, we have stability here. You kind of know what you're getting. Like, it's a 3 versus 3 CTF league. The weeks are going to be laid out. You're going to go on a draft team, and there was like a lot of different people coming at me from all directions. Like, hey, why don't we do 4 versus 4 one week and 3 versus 3 this week? And what if we did a TDM in this week? And I didn't want to do that, because I kind of was looking at it like, we're kind of trying to make this like a sport. We're in the early stages of establishing like this official standard rule set, kind of like any real sport would have. So there's definitely a lot of pushback, and it was very interesting though. I look at it now with, I guess, I think more good things have come from it than bad, in terms of bringing people together that probably hate each other's guts previously. And in terms of competition, I think that it raised like the competition level dramatically. But there's definitely some things that I think we lost. Like, we lost that clan aspect of Doom, where you kind of have like a crew that you always fall back on, and just this like tribalistic thing of like, you can always rely on these people to have your back. That doesn't always happen
Trash talk.
anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing that we've struggled with this since the beginning of the IDL all the way to now, which is the clan format kind of allowed newer players some breathing room. Like you were saying, where you can't get carried anymore. One thing about clans was, okay, like in Unidoom, when we started going on this like recruiting trend, someone like Human Bones here, who we recruited into UD, he wasn't like the greatest player when we grabbed him, but it was like, he's going to probably become a better player, so we're going to give him chances and protect him with our best players in games. We can kind of hide any weaknesses he might have while he gets better. You kind of lose that when you start getting into these draft formats where it's like just kill or be killed. And for years we've kind of looked at how do we, we're at we have an issue where we have enough people to do these pretty decent sized leagues, but we don't have enough people to kind of run two leagues of quality together, where you have like the minor league,
Oh,
and then we
I should
never.
probably say that when I was actually when I joined IDL,
Yeah.
I was almost instantly railroaded into the board, and I was put in charge of the minor league.
Well, good work.
So basically, the first year I was on the board, I was in charge of the league, because at that point we had a lot of overflow. There was like a ton of people who didn't get drafted. So we actually managed to get a season of the rejects, the overflow. And it was
Jeez.
okay, it wasn't a perfect season. A lot of the people just flaked out, but we got a lot of pretty decent matches. And that was probably one of the best IDL seasons I look back at. Like one of the best achievements, because a lot of those IDLR players eventually motivated themselves to become full IDL players.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that there's so the IDLR or the IDDL, which we tried to, which is the same exact thing, pretty much. Like it just they they're a good idea. Like you want to get these people reps and get them play, and there's a couple problems that I never really figured out exactly how to deal with. Number one is these players are typically available to be picked up and moved into the major league team, right? If a team needs a player and they're like, hey, this is the top player in the developmental league, look at him just blowing out all the other people. We want to grab him, which is kind of what it's designed for, right? You're trying to get these people some opportunities to play on the real, A teams. But I think also there's a sense that if I don't make it onto one of the main teams, I'm humiliated. And that was something that I had a hard time trying to figure out, like, how do we ever remedy that? Because I mean, the fact is just that you're just not getting on a team. We want to find you a way to play, but some people really did not like being put on the bottom, the second tier league. So that was definitely one of the issues, and we've talked about possibly revisiting something like that for the WDL nowadays, where either we would do something like maybe we would run it a little bit different time, like right before the season, but then who do you let into it? And there's a lot of logistical issues with it,
Well, I think too part of it is that those games just don't matter. Like, I mean, I don't mean to say that in like a negative way, but nobody is. There aren't going to be 60 people sitting around watching a stream of the developmental Doom League finals. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not the event that people are there to see. So when you've got this whole main league going on with all these great games, and then you have the the B-sides down there, it doesn't have the same feeling. So I think, yeah, we've always struggled to find to keep people's attention and to make it work. I mean, ideally,
on the other hand, it's still better than
nothing at all.
Just practice matches.
Yeah,
Practice matches are they're worthless basically. At least like this meant something, maybe. I understand that. Yeah, it's hard to put a hard value on those matches, because it's the B-sides. Yeah, but it's still a level above just a completely random practice match of including your B-sides.
well, and so we start with season 1, where we had a lot of games. I recall playing in a lot of games that were 2v1. I mean, there was structure there, but there wasn't a lot of structure. And then season 2, it exploded. I mean, didn't we do 12 teams in season 2? I mean, wasn't it? It was kind
Yeah,
of,
season 2 was like the biggest season ever. Actually, if you look
yeah.
back on it, I think it was 12 seasons and like 15 weeks long.
It was insane, and
From like start to end.
there was a team that went like 0-12. I mean, it was
It
crazy,
was,
and so there
yeah,
were so many people involved. But you started to get people like the competitive level of players at that point reached this peak. It just kept, or I should say, it kept going higher and higher and higher, and it was like the best anyone had ever played, and then we would play private CTF matches for hours at a time, and people started to get really not so nice towards the new players. Private CTF was always this like elitist club, and so when you have
for sure.
the best players in private CTF saying, "Well, I'm not going to I'm not going to pick this person," and this person might go unpicked for an hour in Prive. Like they might never get picked on a team. That's really hard to foster new players when you start to reach that point. And I think around season 2, season 3, when stuff started getting real, it was like, yeah, we can get 75 signups, but I mean, who are some of those people and where did they go? Because we were never able to retain them because of just the
Right.
attitudes and the way that we played back then.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was definitely a mixture of all those things, attitudes, and because there definitely were players that tried to get them like their tries, and some of those people weren't really very serious. But yeah, it's tough to find a way in this system to foster growth, and it's something that we've always struggled with. And I'm hoping that it's something that we can kind of solve in the future here, which I'm sure we'll kind of talk about that stuff in a few minutes. But I just it's something that's always perplexed me, and something that I've felt that the community kind of lost moving from that clan to the league format. So
Definitely.
So you've already touched upon the Kilgore years, which is certainly a controversial issue. But now let's talk about real deal, the no star years.
oh, okay. Well, I don't think that just the random listener is going to want to hear about all this, but we had a lot of personalities in the IDL. A lot of and we were talking about Game of Thrones style politics earlier. This was like the height of it, I think.
I think No
Probably
Star may
that.
have written Game of Thrones. I don't know.
It might have been loosely based on the IDL from 2008 to 2011 because, oh, yeah, that's the reason I'm bald, I think. So, I don't know. I liked No Star. I really did. But he probably wasn't good for the community long term.
That's kind of what I was getting at with like seasons 3 and 4 and 5 is now we have these players who are established and there's kind of a hierarchy and you're expecting certain players to win and certain players you just start to get to know people and you know how they act and how they are in a community setting. And so you had the board, which the IDL board supported you as the commissioner and kind of decided on rules and maps and that sort of all the structure around the league. And some people took issue with that, and so there were these little things that happened throughout the entire couple years that the main portion of the IDL. So it just created this weird environment alongside all of the regular port drama and stuff like that. And then you decided to step away from the league after a couple years, which I think may have been a direct result of some of that stuff. I mean, I know you had some other stuff going on, personally, but running the league at that point after 8 seasons of squabbling must have weighed on your conscience quite a bit. Conscience.
Yeah, it definitely got tiring. It's like, hey, some of you guys are in like your late 20s. I really don't feel like I should have to babysit you, which is still a problem nowadays, but except now they're in their 30s. But yeah, I think I just needed a break. And also, if I'm being perfectly candid with you, I was kind of curious to see how it could work if I wasn't running the day to day, and just so sorry about that, but I just was curious because it's like at that point I'm thinking, well, do I really want to like do this forever? Like 2 or 3 times a year. Like if I could pass it off and it can run without me. I mean, the infrastructure was kind of there at that point. I think we were we were probably like 8 seasons in. So the infrastructure was there. Everything was kind of established. There was a community around it. There was a support system of server owners and all sorts of stuff like that. So I just kind of wanted to see what would happen.
I mean,
And
we definitely did debate a lot. We tried to move from the obviously obsolete the demon, which was we were basically stuck on the obsolete 108 version. So we moved to Zendronum with even like monetary prizes.
right, well, you
and
skipped the Odamex.
and we also
Yeah.
had a season on Odamex.
I believe we had three
seasons.
seasons. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
should we go back and talk about how this ties into how we got into this? So this was, we started the IDL and all this stuff in 2006, but at the time, my thought was, well, these people don't know that Odamex, this new source port, is going to drop in 4 months or whenever at the time. It ended up being 4 months, but it's going to come out in January, and then we can take all these people that we just got to play in this first season of the IDL and move them right into the second season of IDL on Odamex. Well, Odamex came out, and it was kind of a dud. For a lot of people, even though we were super proud of it and we worked super hard on it, I mean, we were putting in like crazy amount of hours, all of us. The people that said they were going to have our back didn't show up. They didn't help. It pretty much just went over like a lead balloon. It had a lot of bugs and problems that we didn't find because we were, our programmers and testers were testing in private secret, basically. So it took some time to kind of get it up to a playable state. And by then, now it had this reputation that it was like, I remember there used to be a meme going around that showed like the 3 source ports, and they had like the engines and like I think the Z-Dam one was like a Model T, and the Skull Tag was like a Lamborghini, and Odamex was like like a Conestoga wagon or something. So without wheels, maybe, I don't know. It was so yeah, so that hurt, but we kept working on it, and eventually by 2012-ish, well, really 2011, Dr. Sean showed up, and who I freaking love. Dr. Sean's like the man, and he showed up, and with his help, and then with the help of Alex Max and Mank and Hyper Eye and that whole team that we had, and me and Hex constantly testing, and we were able to get it up to a point where we felt pretty confident that we could move the league finally, because Z-Damon, we were playing on this like old outdated version of Z-Damon, and they were going to bring out a new version, and they told us that the new version might not allow private servers, and it had like some sort of problem with demos. You couldn't like record your games anymore or something like that.
They were only going to give the server binary out to certain people.
Right.
And it was going to be in like this perpetual beta stage, which is what 1.9 ended up being. Which was
109 was in beta stage for 5 years.
Yeah. So I feel like some of that was actually intentionally to screw us.
I think so. Well, because
I wouldn't even call it like it was intentional to screw you, because honestly, they basically disabled any sort of demo recording for 5 years. Holy shit! That was just it. Honestly, like this is such a niche thing that you won't even hear about it, but this is what killed the demon rocket jumping community. You've probably never heard of it because it consisted of like 4 people, but I
Is
was
that a
one of them.
community? I think it's small.
But I wasn't able to record demos for 5 fucking years, so I gave up.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, they just did a lot of things that like actively antagonized their players. Like they hated their players. Just didn't make sense to me then. It still doesn't make sense to me now. I don't know.
well, and
That's all I got to say
there was
about it, I guess.
politics within the IDL too. So after you left and I took over, I tried because I had a better relationship with ZDAM and we were still using it at that time. I tried to get it so that we could have the support of ZDAMon, utilizing their forums and their website and, just being able to advertise to more people because that was our goal was to...
I was actually really heavily involved in that negotiation as well, because at that point, basically, I was actually talking with Kilgore, which was probably better than anything one of you Americans
I was
could
talking
say.
with him as well,
No,
Well, I
I
didn't
mean,
exactly have a
I
line of
was
communication
like
with the guy,
whispering into his ears about feature requests and everything. Like I was actually friendly with Kilgore,
So was I.
and
We were great.
then at that point, I was like, could we get a little bit more lenience? And then I said the word Ralphis, and that's when that entire effort ended, basically.
Well, here's what I got them to agree to. I got them to agree that we would be able to put our servers on their master server. I think we may have had to follow their ban list, though, which meant Ralph couldn't watch. He could still play in the league, but he would have to play his games on private servers, and he wouldn't be able to watch any games on the public one.
Yeah.
So it was just like kind of a no-win situation, really.
Basically, Ralphis was persona non grata, so he wouldn't be able to participate in any way.
Right. So then, like I mentioned, I won't go into the details of it, but politics in the IDL, and it was not fun to run at that point. And especially, ZDaemon had that same version out for God knows how many years. It was buggy, and, we started playtesting Odamex. We had a lot of people that once again said, this feels great. We'll play when the season comes. So we made the decision. Let's get real. It was really Ralph's decision to move it. I just happened to be the figurehead.
I was definitely,
which is fine.
I was definitely working on that behind the scenes, and that was a part of the reason too that I've spent a lot of time on that too. So when I handed it, the reins over to you, I was working on Odamex a ton.
Yeah, but I think it was the right decision because clearly we were stuck on a broken version, and we were going to get no demo recording for 5 years. But again, we experienced, a lot of the players that committed to playing and saying they were going to support the league on Odamex didn't really show up for that. So we ran a couple seasons there, and then, Do and I think we just kind of burnt ourselves out at that point. That would have been like only 3 years, so not nearly as long as you ran it, but 3 years was enough for us.
Yeah. Wasn't even 3 years. There's only 3 seasons, right? Or was it 3 years? I guess it would have been 3 years. Yeah.
2011 to 2014. Yeah.
Sure.
But yeah, it was just the entire IDLB. The board was just on fire constantly, and yeah, it was not pleasant.
So 2014. Go ahead.
It worked out though.
Didn't we have Genova on the board?
I've blocked out a lot of the memories of that time. Other than in 2011, I spent 9 hours arguing with Mass VC about the definition of the word trade. because I was 19 and I didn't have a job, so why not sit here and
We
argue?
literally had to inspect if Mass VC was no star in disguise or not. Which, like, holy
Which he
shit!
wasn't actually, but yeah.
But so my point in bringing all of this up is so you get to 2014 and Do and I are like, well, I pretty much said to Do, I'm done. I'm not doing this again. And Do's like, well, let's just wait and see. So it didn't end up happening, but Ralph was starting to get the itch again to do something. And he was like, when are you going to do something? Are you going to do something? And I was like, I'm not fucking doing anything. I was just not committing to anything. And then I think you were talking to Do. And one of the conversations that came up in the board channel was, hey, what about Xandronum? And I think we talked about it. And there was some sort of miscommunication there where you were hearing from me that I wasn't going to do anything, but Do said we were doing it on Xandronum. And you were like, well, fuck this guy. I'm going to go make a new league, the World Doom League.
Oh, so that is WDL a product of mishearing my
It's all your
conversation?
fault.
Yeah, I think it's directly caused by that.
Oh God. Okay. I'm actually proud.
Okay, so okay, here's my mindset at this point, leading up to this. We've been crushing Odamex. Sean has been working. I think he's like ruined his life working on Odamex so much that like we were trying to get everything ready for the IDL. Okay, Sean got GPL slopes. He beat Eternity Engine, which has had broken ass slopes for 10+ years. He did it in like a weekend. Like he was working very hard to make sure that we could give the IDL players everything they wanted. And, they were like a pain in our ass, but the port got a lot better because of it. So even though we were all stressed and I went bald at 24 and Sean might have ruined his life, you know what? We ended up with a pretty solid source port by the end of it. So then you guys kind of go quiet. And yeah, admittedly, I start getting kind of pissed because I'm like, I kind of, I associate the IDL with me. I worked hard to make the IDL like a thing. Like, on Doom World, they just call me IDL founder or whatever. Someone made my name on there. So people from outside the area knew what the IDL was. Like, I was proud of everything it had done, even when I wasn't in charge, even when you guys were doing it. And now it's just like going dormant. And then you don't know. Well, I guess you kind of know. You're telling me on one hand, Bones, that you're not. I don't know. Maybe we'll run it. Maybe we won't. And then I hear freaking Do. He's like, "Yeah, Xandronum. Looking at
Dude,
Xandronum."
I had
And now I'm
no
pissed.
I had no idea about
Lost my
anything
mind.
about this. So this is completely new to me. So I mean, yeah,
You've never heard this?
nope. I
Oh yeah, this is all your fault, dude.
I'm like yeah, it's me, Odamex. It was me all along. Like
So yeah, that's what happened. I forget. Like I kind of had. I felt like you guys were going to take it over to Skull Tags, Andronum, whatever, and that was it. And I was like, I can't believe this. Like we put all this work in. They're going behind my back, and they're going to just do this. And I thought I'd heard the summer. You guys were going to do it in the summer. So I'm like, well, fuck. We got to get our own thing going. So I start reaching out to, I had like my own little network of people, from UD that were helping, but also I start reaching out to people that maybe were a little ostracized from other areas of the community, like Water. He was
okay.
he had like,
Hold up there. Like that was
what?
okay. Looking back at that, that ostracization was not entirely, out of touch.
maybe not, but you know what? At the time,
I understand. I understand.
he was in. You know, he threw in with us, and I right now I don't have a lot of strong positive feelings towards him, but there's no doubt that he helped the WDL come out swinging in a way that the IDL was not going to be able to compete with, because we had all these like in-depth stats, way more in-depth than we ever had with the IDL. So I guess for anyone that's listening that's wondering, like, what are we talking about now? We went from IDL to WDL. So now you got Do and Bones are kind of in charge of the IDL, and I'm like, well, let's just start something up, something new, because now I'm very highly motivated by spite. I'll just say that. Like almost all of my accomplishments have been driven by spiting somebody. I don't know why that is, but it's just the way it is. So I wanted to spite you guys, so we start planning for this new league, and I planned for the summer. So I put that out, and then I think Bones, correct me if I'm wrong, then you see it and you feel like I screwed you.
Yeah.
And so now you schedule the IDL to run at the same time as the WDL on the opposite port.
Yeah, so I saw doomleague.org get posted, the usual fucking UD campaign. Here we go again, as if I wasn't involved in a million of those myself. Here it is. And I click it. I'm like, what the fuck is this? So that's when I went to the IDL board channel. I was like, IDL Zandronum. It's starting the same day. That's basically what we did. And that's the only reason it was ever on Zandronum. We put up a monetary prize because we needed to try and do something. But fuck, if that season wasn't a huge mistake. I mean, I do things out of spite too, but that was a bad one.
The season actually was sort of successful, but
yes,
I hated the background of the entire organization. You could tell that the entire thing was sort of like coming apart. Like everyone hated that we just continued doing the same thing, except we tried to prop it up with money. So yeah.
Once Ralph left, right? I mean, Ralph is the ultimate authority. He created the league. If he says something, it's just going to happen, like no one's really going to question it. But I think when I came in, and part of this is my fault too, in a sense. Like I wanted to get more people involved, but at the same time, I mean, nobody listened to me. Like nobody would listen to anyone like they would listen to Ralph, because it's Ralph's league. It's not really my league. I'm just running it. So it just started to create all these situations where people were, like, well, this idea sucks. Let's do this. And they wouldn't even play. They just started doing like really backhanded shit. And once you get all these people involved, all these different people, it just becomes political. And the board channel was a mess. We started having like, oh, let's have a couple people in here that we like that can contribute. And it kind of had like a negative effect. It was like, it just created too much conversation and too much angst. And it was just never going to work.
Like the actual vote on anything was like that was such a mess, and it was always like it was No Star and Mass and I don't know who else was there.
Zen and you and Mike.
Zen and me. Even though Zen tries to pretend that he hates me, but we were actually it was me and Zen versus.
Well, he pretends to hate everybody, so
it was Zen and Do versus No Star and Mass, and Mike Hale in the middle, who refused.
Mike Hale in the middle, yeah,
and he wouldn't relinquish his board seat.
That was
part of the bylaws.
Always such a pain to get anything done. And yeah, like anytime Zen tries to pretend that he hates me, he's actually my best bud.
Well, the reason why the WDL is successful and the IDL became non-successful, I think it boils down to the fact that we moved an entire league full of people that were used to playing on Z-Daemon, and we moved them over to Odamex. Yes, it was a necessary move, but they were just not, at that time, not interested at all in playing something different. When the WDL started, that was started by Ralph out of spite, yes, but people, it didn't contain anyone in there that didn't want to play Odamex. So it was like the most fun probably that anyone ever had, because we were running our thing on Zandronum, so we took all the bottom feeders, all the annoying people, and WDL got all the some of the new people and some of the laid back people who just wanted to fucking play Doom, So I think the IDL just needed to be over at that point. I think it was just, there was no salvaging it.
Yeah, IDL just became too toxic.
Yeah.
Overall.
Yeah. We've talked about this before, before this, not recorded, but I think in retrospect, splitting was best because, like you said, number one, when the WDL got restarted its first season, we got only people that really wanted to be there. So it was super fun. It was one of the least stressful things I've ever done. We already had the formula for how to make a league work, but now we had only people that were positive and wanted to be there and have fun. So the first couple seasons in particular were just great. And number two, though, was it gave me a chance to reflect on where I thought I might have went wrong with the IDL, kind of looking at what were the breakdowns and failings over time that caused so many issues in that league. And also to try some new ideas. Like, we implemented the auction draft instead of the straight draft, because at this point in my life now I'm older and I make money, so I'm gambling in fantasy football drafts, and they have auction drafts, and I'm like, wow, these are like so much more exciting and better than just a straight draft where you just pick players, where the captains are actually bidding on players with a budget. So we gave it a try, and it ended up being pretty awesome. I mean, the teams now, generally speaking, I think they come out more competitive than they ever did in the IDL as a whole, in terms of parity in the league. But also from some administrative perspective, I guess, I saw where the failings were. Like, you guys are reminiscing about how much fun you had on the IDL board. There's no WDL board. The board is basically it's kind of like a meritocracy. If you're pulling your weight around the WDL, you're going to get a seat at the table to at least like have your voice heard. If you're just not doing anything, you're not going to be able to have a vote or say. So I take the people that help the league, that are a big part in getting everything together. Like Kay Blair, he's huge to us. I mean, he helps keep the servers running perfect. And at the time, Water, he put everything together. So Water was a huge player, and I respected what he had to say until we had kind of a falling out of sorts. And those types of people they're always going to be heard more than just like the random player that just calls me like a fat idiot, bald moron. Like, they're not going to have a say. They're never going to have a say. And it's definitely made the league a lot.
Wait. That's what I did my entire career.
Yeah, I know. That's why I don't have any more use. There's no more room for dues.
Well,
we did away with the dude position.
What do you mean? Because now that gives me a segue into your what is it? 2010 project called Double Impact or something?
Oh, we're just gonna move right into mapping, huh? Okay. Well, that was a long time ago. It was long before WDL.
No, well, at almost, like, it was at the height of your activity, right?
Yeah, I was going hard on Doom around that time for sure. I mean, the IDL was running, Bones had taken the reins, but I was still playing in every game, and Bones is messaging me every day. So
Don't
I
act
still,
like it wasn't just me. We were messaging each other. What the fuck?
I know, but I was still heavily involved in everything. So then I started taking on this single player project, which I really hadn't mapped for single player much, and
I mean,
the way that project.
okay.
Do you want me to go into
One
that
more thing
project,
before
or
you start this.
okay?
Actually, your Doom wiki page says that in 2002 you mapped something called Andrew B sucks it,
Oh, and
and
its sequel.
Andrew B still sucks it.
Yes. I don't. They didn't. They weren't on any top 10 lists that year. Oh, jeez. I think that there's something funny about that. I actually searched my name on the speedrun database, and the only speedrun I ever have recorded is for that. Andrew B sucks it. Which I guess, I don't know. Andrew B must have annoyed me because
Andrew B
whatever,
is
he
an
got
upstanding citizen of Doomworld, right? Yeah.
yeah. Alrighty then. Well,
Okay.
I actually just pulled up my wiki page. I don't remember Doom Anomaly Shotgun, so I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Let's just ignore all of that and let's move
That page
going back.
needs to be updated, I think.
Yeah, I was looking at it earlier
Very out of
just to
date.
refresh myself, and I was like, oh, the IDL is currently played on Xandronum. That's good to know. Yeah.
Oh, who updated that to say that? Jeez. Well, I don't know. Someone that manages the wiki should get on that because I don't think I'm allowed to write about myself.
Oh, all of the people do that.
They all write about themselves?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm about to have the longest article ever. Nah, I really can't be bothered to write it, actually. But maybe we could just transcribe this whole thing. Just put it on there.
Yeah. Just this transcription of this entire interview will be your page.
Yeah. Well, all right. So do you want me to talk about WDL now, or do you want me to go back to? We're going back to 2010.
I don't know. Do you want do you want to go through all of the iteration of WDL? Like where?
Well, I mean, we were already talking about it. We could probably.
I know. Yeah, it's still running. It's still strong.
Well,
We basically we
What's
are
that?
going
no,
to
I mean,
play in the next iteration if we're allowed.
the logical progression was to mention, yes, the WDL had very successful seasons, and then you took a bit of a break right before. Well, when was that? Winter 2018.
Oh, it was after the 28 winter 2018
Right.
season. Yeah.
Did we want to talk about that at all, or did we want to just not talk about that?
Nah, I mean it's kind of minutia.
Yeah. So
The league went on hiatus.
yes.
And as there always is, there was drama around it, and I just decided I needed a freaking break. So, I mean, actually, the season ended fine, so it wasn't like it was actually postseason drama. So,
and I think interestingly enough, one of the things that came out of that was, well, first of all, this podcast, but the MDF itself was kind of born from the, these leagues kind of play off each other, so. The IDL goes dormant, WDL comes up, WDL goes dormant, and then Du and I decided to do the MDF. So that was really good, and now we have this podcast here where we get to talk about Ralphis coming back with the 25th season, if you combine IDL and WDL, the 25th season last summer, which I think was it was just kind of came out of nowhere, I mean, it had been quiet for 2 years, and you were pretty happily semi-retired, I think, not really interested in running stuff. And then, every once in a while, I think the idea would pop into your head to do something. And then Yeah, out of nowhere, it was like, bam, I'm running a new season. It's happening in the summer. Let's do this. And it was like, you know, blowing into the fucking conch call or whatever. And everyone just showed up out of nowhere.
It
So,
just seemed like the time was right.
yeah.
So there were a couple things. There was a good chance I would have run it earlier, but Odamex was in this weird state where we were kind of getting ready to put the new version out, and then we did put the new version out. So Odamex moved from 0.7 to 0.8, and we ran into an issue, which I'm not going to go into the specifics of it, but we didn't have access to our stats anymore. They were built into the server. We didn't have a source to it. It was unavailable to us now, and it should have been available. So it was unavailable to us, and our stats were output in a certain way. Now, they weren't entirely documented either. Our server, like our web server, would process those stats, and that's how the site ran. It would come up with who won the games and all that information. And to me, that's a critical part of the WDL. Having all that cool pageantry around the games and the players, that's a part of what makes that experience so special for players and spectators. So I didn't want to have a season where we didn't have that. So fortunately, Alex Max returns, the prodigal son returns to Odamex, and after he'd been working around Zandronum for some years, and he did me a solid, and he helped me and Blair, and me and Blair worked with him to get those stats back in for the new version, and made sure that we would always have the source to them. So once that was done, well, I guess so it wasn't done actually. I just assumed that we could get it done. And the way that I thought that we might be able to get it done was if I announced the season and say that it's starting on date X. And now all of a sudden there's like a deadline of when this needs to be done. And Alex came up huge. We finished it with I don't know, maybe like a day or two to spare. Reverse engineering all those stats, and we got them outputting, and everything seems to work. So yeah, it was just the right time. 2 years. I heard that people weren't really happy with what the scene was over at San Jeronimo. Like, just people were saying like, hey, it's just kind of like a shadow of like what the WDL was. And it was like, well, I mean, we could do it again if we have the resources, which we do, and if we can get the stats, which we didn't yet, but we could, then let's see what we can do. So everything kind of fell into place. I think people were excited to see it come back, and we had a pretty good set of captains. And also, I think, like we said, the time was just right. There were a lot of people coming back that we hadn't seen in years, like Chain Dude and Italian Stallion, and That's Just Prime, and all these guys from the Z-Demon era of IDL were suddenly showing up and it just set it up working. It just was really cool, and it was really cool to play with all those old players again, and it's been really fun. And I'm kind of glad that the IDL and WDL have reconverged into one accepted lineage. In retrospect, I kind of like the IDL name. I wish maybe it didn't have to be the way that it did and have happened the way that it did. But
Just
when I look
rename
at
it. Just
well,
appropriate the name.
yeah, I mean we've thought about it, but I think we're just going to keep WDL for now. It's worked out, and I don't know. Maybe the IDL is cursed, so I don't want to change.
That's a
I don't
good
want to
point.
change back to it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, like
So,
you don't want to summon No Star out of the left field.
yeah. I think as long as we just acknowledge that the IDL and WDL are, except for one summer, are the same thing, then yeah, it's cool. And we respect the IDL, lineage of titles and players and stuff like that. So we have all that on our forums. So it's just, in my head, it's just one big comprehensive event. And I hope that we can run one in the very near future here. We're kind of getting the new version of Odamex wrapped up. Should be out in a couple weeks, I presume, at this point, as of February 11th, 2021. So 0.9 should be coming very soon. We've been doing a lot of testing,
And it's going to be a
everything looks good.
big version. There's lots of new game modes coming. Did you want to talk about those? Because I think I mentioned this to you recently, but well, okay. According to Ralph, I'm the only one in the world that cares about three-way CTF. Now that might be true, maybe I don't know, but three-way CTF is going to be re-implemented back into Odamex. We've got last man standing, team last man standing, right?
Yep.
Survival, which I think if anybody knows, survival is. I mean, survival is the thing that has survived, but it's also the thing that really, I think, brings communities together because it's the most user-friendly game mode for everybody, I think. And there are just so many WODs out there. So yeah, did you want to talk about the game modes a little bit and, maybe what the next version of Odamex is going to have to offer?
Yeah, so as far as game modes, we're kind of taking a different approach with game modes than what's been done before, where you kind of just have these like set game modes. What me and Alex kind of decided might be to play is that we're going to introduce these Halo style server modifiers, which I know it's a mouthful, but basically you could take any game mode and kind of morph it into what you want it to be. So there's really only still 4 game types, right? You have your co-op, your deathmatch, your team deathmatch, and your capture the flag. And then from there, we start introducing, well, do you want to have lives? And if you set lives on the server to 1, well, now you have 1 life survival co-op, or 1 life last man standing, or team last man standing, or you could even put it in capture the flag if you want, or you can increase the lives to whatever 50. So you have room to play with there. If you want to turn on rounds, we have a round system now. You can turn that on in any game mode. We have some other interesting things that we've added, like for capture the flag modes, where one team has the flag and the other team doesn't start with a flag, and one team defends and the other team or teams attack, because you can turn it on in 3-team CCF too. So there's just by adding these, all of a sudden we now have created the possibility for dozens of new game modes. It's really kind of up to server administrators or players to kind of tinker around and see what they can come up with. Some will come up with something cool. So I think that's going to be a very interesting thing. I'm hoping that it takes off and people start experimenting with them and seeing what kind of cool stuff they can come up with. We've really worked pretty hard on adding a lot of features there, and Alex has been working his butt off, and so is the rest of the team, Chow and Hobo Master. We have some new contributors as well that have been helping out a lot, so I think it's going to be a huge, big release. There's all sorts of other features too. WAD downloading now is awesome. So one thing that Odamex has always had that I think has been an underutilized feature among all Doom ports, not just multiplayer, but all Doom ports, is that you can change the WAD on the fly in the game. So most of the time you got to stop your game and load whatever other WAD you want, but Odamex can change anytime. So one thing that was a pain in the butt, though, was like if you changed on the server and it tried to download like another big WAD, it sucked. It was slow or it didn't work. Well, now it downloads through HTTP, and it downloads so fast. I mean, you could download like 50 megabyte WADs in seconds. So it's going to open up the possibility where, hey, you have like just an endless survival co-op server, and when you beat the last level, it just goes to the next one, the next WAD, or you have 1,000 map deathmatch rotation, and yeah, if you don't have the WAD, well, guess what? You're going to have it in like 2 seconds after that map changes to it. You won't have to do anything special. It's kind of like a Git WAD built right into the client. So that's a huge thing. There's all sorts of bug fixes and compatibility things that have come in here where like a lot more Boom and MBF maps work now, like Valiant and Ev Eternity and all these WADs. They might not work 100%, but they work pretty close. We also seem to have figured out Voodoo Dolls. Alex came up with a workaround for that seems to work way better than Zandronum's. So Things are looking pretty
Wait.
good.
So when you're talking about voodoo dolls and you're mentioning Valiant, is
Yeah.
that actually like MBF support? Because MBF
Uh,
support is pretty far up there.
yes. You could pretty much
Nice,
play through it without many issues.
nice. Because
There might be some bugs we missed, but you can pretty much play through.
boom support usually covers the voodoo doll conveyors and everything up to that point, but Valiant is actually even a level above, where you actually need to support some MBF features,
Right.
like the A jump function when you kill the spider demon, and it has the arachnotron, and it has a 50% chance of spawning the arachnot orb. You know, the flying creature.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, one thing that's really cool about it is like Ebb Eternity. All those crazy new monsters that they added, like they all work. Like the weird gray
Nice,
cacodemon thing
nice.
that is like freaky and
Okay,
makes scary noises and stuff like that. Yeah, and the
so
cyber baron and all that stuff. Yeah, they work. The we were having an issue with the last level, the last map. I don't know if that's going to end up working by the time we release, but you can play the first 29 maps. But that was a big hurdle for us because almost all those maps open with a scripted event that involves like voodoo dolls. We were trying to figure out how to make that work, and Alex came up with this like random thought, just came to him that he would create these like avatars instead of traditional voodoos, and yeah, they work pretty well. But instead of harping on that forever, that'll be coming out soon. But other stuff, I mean, we got the 3-team CTF for Bones. Um, all those different game mode things I was talking about, the attack defend style, capture the flag, the in client WAD downloading I was talking about. We added a join queue for spectators. That was Hobo Master had originally added that. So that works in all the game modes, not just duel, but that'll work in all of them. Improved the mouse code. That's been a big thing. Mouse is like, I mean, honestly, this version will come out and someone still won't be happy with the mouse, but people seem to be pretty happy with the mouse right now in the new dev builds. So that should be a big thing. Um, Supporting modern map infos, so more WADs work, modern language lumps. We have a new console font, so it's like a lot more readable now. Um, we're kind of getting like some new features like support for sprites with 16 rotations. I don't know how much that's actually used by any mods, but I don't know. You could use it now. And we have some contributors. I don't know if this is going to make point 0.9 or not, but there's a couple other things out there like UMap info and dehacked extra lumps. I think they're probably maybe going to be on the cusp of point 0.9 here, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're in the immediately following version. That'll probably come out like, a month or so afterwards usually. But I'm trying to think what else we got going on. We got support for Nintendo Switch. If you have your Switch modded, it's got like support for that to just run out of the box. So, and then just a ton of bug fixes, man. There's just so much stuff in there. I'm just trying to run them all off the top of my head. It's been a long time coming for this, so it's going to be a great release, and I think that it's going to be a big release. We've had a couple releases that were big kind of milestones that I think of with Odamex. Like point 0.3 was the first time that it was really kind of playable online, and then point 0.7 was like this very stable version that had slopes and all the Z-Daemon type of things that people wanted. Now we're being able to finally kind of bust out and do our own thing. I think you're going to start seeing that more as we go forward, where instead of kind of being the clone, where we're kind of just trying to copy what Z-Daemon and Skulltag or Xandrodon were doing, we're going to start kind of blazing our own path now, because the way we look at it is we've kind of caught them, and now it's time for us to set the standard of what we want things to be. So from here on out, you're going to start seeing a lot of new cool things coming up. Sound good?
Yeah. Okay. Let me throw you a curveball because we've
Okay.
been talking about like your multiplayer career for a long time. So I'm going to touch on your single player career for a moment, and I'm going
Yes.
to actually ask you about your music
Oh, interesting. I don't get many
because
questions.
you're a big time music person, right? You
Uh,
actually, for your entire career, you've been making
yeah,
music for Doom
I have.
projects.
I have. Yeah.
So let us introduce Ralphis, the music guy.
Great to be here. Thank you. Yeah. So, I mean, what do you what do you want to know? I mean, yeah, I started. Well, I mean, you just want a whole background of my music. When I was young, I
Oh yeah, like I heard you actually have some sort of like background in like music education, so you're not like just pulling it out of your ass.
kind of a little bit. Yeah. I mean, I excelled at playing music in like middle school and high school in particular, and I was offered some opportunities at the collegiate level to go on and pursue a music degree. I actually decided against it. I just, at the time, I was like, I don't really see a lot of money in this. The joke was kind of on me, um, because I kept still making music. I mean, since middle school, I think back in like the early 2000s, I started making midis, and that was kind of how I got my start dabbling around. I've always really loved kind of copying music, and I've always had a love for video game music because I played a lot of video games, and I just thought that there was something very cool about making a song that's super memorable, but it's only about 40 seconds long. And that's a very, it's not an easy skill. Some people will minimize that. They'll say, oh, it's like video game music. But to make a earworm that you will repeat in your head and it's only 40 to 50 seconds long, it's not the easiest thing. So I kind of modeled my little MIDI crafting career around video game music, and I started way back. I think Doom related. I think the first MIDI I ever submitted was kind of like an E1M1 MIDI ripoff for Free Doom, like way back. I'm talking like, oh my gosh, that must have been like 2000 or 2001, whenever Free Doom started, and it sucked. It was horrible, horrible MIDI. I don't know if those repos are still around, but if they are, feel free to go look it up because it's trash. I think I did one for E1M5 as well, and they were pretty much kind of rips where it was like I was basically doing the Bobby Prince thing where I kind of made the song almost like the other one, but not quite. They were terrible though. And then I think as I went on and I was messing around with the UDMs and I started to get a little better at making music, I would kind of shoehorn my stuff in there sometimes to the chagrin of my clanmates who probably didn't want my midis on their maps, but too bad. And then I think the first one I ever did for like someone else, well, we had like the Odamex CTF we were doing, and I remember I made some songs for that. But I know I made 4 songs for Crucified Dreams, which was Afterglow's deathmatch project, and
Are you ashamed of
those were
that?
what?
Just contributing to Crucified Dreams.
No, no. So Crucified
I
Dreams,
love that one. I think it's
people look
super
back on it.
underrated.
Yeah, people look back
I
on it and they
hate
clown
it.
on it, but it was like a big deal at the time. Those they're mostly mapping for looks, but there are some decent maps in there, and at least one decent MIDI for me. I know at least one of those songs is pretty good. Um, and then I did like some of the Odamex CTF ones. I think the first big project Doom related I did. I mean, it's probably the biggest without a doubt, which is Urban Brawl Action Doom 2,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
where Scuba Steve asked me like, "Hey, you want to do this?" Or maybe I said to him I wanted to do it. I don't know. I was kind of younger when I came into the community, and I always liked Scuba, and he used to clown on me a little bit, but I got along with him, and over time I think like a respect grew, and
Oh,
I
wait.
actually, yeah,
Just to put people into perspective, this is 2008, so you weren't the 13-year-old
no,
grasshopper
no,
anymore.
at this point I'm like kind of getting at it. By the time I started working on it, I think it was like right after high school, so we're in like 2007, and I so I don't know if my wiki article mentioned this, but a year or two before that, Action Doom, or whenever, yeah, probably like 3 years maybe, Action Doom 1 came out, and Scuba Steve held a competition for who could get the highest score in the game. Whoever could post the highest score would get like a t-shirt. And I really wanted that t-shirt, and I worked so hard to get a high score in Action Doom 1, and I think I wanted, whatever I did, I got a t-shirt. So after that, we were like real cool with each other, and I actually don't remember exactly how. Like, I think it's very possible that I was just like, "Hey, let me do the music for Action Doom 2," and then he was like, "Okay." It might have very well happened like that, but I worked very hard on those songs, all the original ones anyway, and I don't know. Some people seem to like them. Sometimes I'll cruise around YouTube just to see what, if any new comments are on those videos that people have posted of them over the years, and 'cause some other people uploaded them too. And sometimes people are like, "Oh man, like the soundtrack is like so nostalgic; it brings back memories." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's like awesome. That's exactly why I want to write music, because those nostalgic video game soundtracks are what inspired me to write the music. So if I even make like just a small handful of people feel that way about what I make, that's a really gratifying feeling." So it's writing music has been one of the cooler things I've been able to do. And then of course I ended up parlaying that into like a YouTube channel that it was somewhat successful as well. So
Right, because you're actually a very successful creator of 8-bit music remakes of popular songs, right?
right. So that's I kind of just uploaded a couple of those to my channel as a joke, just messing around. And really, the first ones I'd ever done, I put on YTMND website way back in like I don't know, 2006 or something. So like before YouTube was even really a thing. And I think maybe around like 2009 or 2010, I started putting a couple up on my YouTube. And some like, I don't know, YouTube star at the time or something, like just jacked one of my songs, didn't ask me or anything, just put it in his video, but he linked me. And I just remember like waking up and having like 300 comments on one of my things. So at first I was like kind of annoyed. I was like, this dude just kind of like came and took my shit without asking me. But then I thought about it and I'm like, well, I kind of just took the original people's shit and turned it into an 8-bit. I didn't ask their permission. And then now I also got all these views. So like, I don't know. I guess I'm just going to keep this up. So I just immediately was not mad about it anymore. And I figured, well, I could just use this to I don't know, to maybe kind of launch this channel. And then a bunch of people started ripping my shit off. So then a lot of people started coming to my channel. So it ended up working out. And I landed some pretty cool jobs out of that. I did some songs for Disney for their mobile games.
So this actually led to some professional jobs.
Oh yeah, I've done a good amount of
Great.
professional work now. Yeah, I did like 4 soundtracks for Disney, including there was a cartoon called Gravity Falls. They were like ending the show, and I did the entire original soundtrack for like the final game for that. and that was really cool because I got access to all these assets from the show. Like the final show, I don't know, maybe like 8 months before it was like even aired. It's like I knew how the show ended and all that, but obviously I couldn't say anything. But it was something. And they reached out to me when I received an email from Disney. I actually thought it was a joke from like a friend or something at first, like just messing around with me, trying to screw with me. But then I looked the dude up on LinkedIn and he was real. So I gave him a call and that kind of panned out. And I did some work for another one. I didn't really know who he was at the time. There's this like European electronic music DJ guy named Hardwell. I didn't know who he was. Turns out that he's like one of the biggest EDM guys in the world. I would have charged him a lot more if I knew that. I guess I should have like learned more, but because then I did it. I did the job for them. I didn't hear anything about it, but they said like, hey, if he's ever in town, like just let us know. We'll bring you backstage or whatever, and like you can hang out. I never did that, but I just was looking around YouTube. Dude, he opened his whole show with my song.
Nice.
Yeah, I know. But everyone thinks he made it. Oh, well, whatever. I didn't sign any work for hire thing, so I could talk about that one. So, anyway, yeah, I mean, I've definitely had some interesting gigs, and I'm working on a couple of indie games right now, but I'm not allowed to talk about them yet, or I would. But they'll be coming out in a couple of years, so look me up. Or maybe next year, I don't know.
Like, speaking about this, like, you have some, aside from your mapping on Double Impact, you made some tracks on Double Impact, and
Yes.
I will not ever let you get away with that. Like, dude, put that fucking shit online. Those tracks are really great.
All right. Yeah. I know you've actually bothered me about this before. Yeah, I'm just kind of lazy, man.
Yeah.
I'll get around. I'll get around to it, I guess. So Double Impact's weird because now there's like 2 versions of the soundtrack.
And it's
because
now, wait. Wait, actually, I don't know. Do the id game releases actually use your tracks?
yes.
Holy shit! Then you need to fucking release them.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh
okay, all right. Well, so the boss map, I had to rewrite it though.
Oh my god!
Because we couldn't do the Doom 64 part. So
wait. So like the Doom 64 part was like forbidden because of copyright.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
So I had to remake it. So it's kind of just like a straight E1M8 like remix now. But if you really kind of listen, you could kind of almost hear the remnants of the Doom 64, but it's not quite.
This is amazing. And yeah,
I'm so glad that this stuff like excites you so much because nobody ever asks me about this stuff except you, which is cool. So
I've asked you about this stuff like 3 times, and I will not get off your ass about this.
Yeah, well, I should put it up for sure.
I mean, beyond the soundtrack stuff, I always thought that you had a really good voice too. Like, I remember one song you sent me. I think you must have done it in high school. Wasn't it? Is it called Roll Call? Is that? Am I?
Oh yeah, I had a little rap group in high school.
Yeah, and I mean, I probably have not listened to that song in like 15 years, but I can pull out the chorus in my head. Like, I just always enjoyed that, and of course, on the lighter side, you had the UD rap, and some other stuff that I think has become like lore in the community now. But obviously, someone that couldn't sing or didn't have a good voice wouldn't be able to, put that stuff out and have people like fucking want to listen to it. So,
well, thanks. I never really felt like I had a very good voice, but I kind of just didn't care. So if it's good enough, that works for me. And now I can auto tune it, so now you would actually think I have a good voice for sure.
Well, now I can put out a rap and it might sound okay.
Right.
At least better
Yeah,
than
no,
Zen's, you know.
I definitely like making music. I don't really get to make midis anymore, but it's definitely something simple about making midis because you don't have to worry about like mixing and mastering each instrument. You can kind of just compose a song, and I imagine that's probably why the Essels and the Jimmies like making midis as well, because you don't really have to worry about all the production crap. You can just write a song. But yeah, I've been around
Well, I
rap.
remember when I think it was the Sprite album came out, I posted that on Doom World News. And everyone got upset because this isn't Doom News or whatever. But, like, it was someone... There were other things that people were posting that were not necessarily Doom related. You know, it was like personal projects that people were working on. And it was like, well, here's something that's really good that, you know, someone that's been around forever put out and you should listen to it. And, you know, I wouldn't have posted it if I thought it sucked. So I think it's definitely a part of your story that I'm glad Du brought it up because I was like, I was going to gloss over it and I shouldn't have. So yeah, I mean, I think if anyone really, I mean, if you go to you have your website is still up. You've got all your stuff on there, more or less, right? I mean, you have your YouTube channel. I mean, there's a ton of stuff there that people can get a chance to listen to, and it's all super good. Like,
Thanks.
yeah,
I definitely recommend hit my YouTube up. I have, if anyone's curious, I have aside from like the 8-bit remix stuff, I have all my soundtracks from like Urban Brawl and Action Doom and the expansion and all that stuff up there. And maybe eventually I'll have my Double Impact stuff up there, but I think I have a few original songs here and there spread throughout. It's fun to make that stuff. It's a little harder nowadays. I just don't have as much time necessarily. Whereas back then, it was like I had nothing but time to just try out stupid ideas, and I don't know. Maybe also now that I've done it somewhat professionally, I'm a little bit more of a perfectionist. Whereas, and this kind of goes back to like the thing I was talking about with maps earlier, right? I should really just chill out and just put stuff out because sometimes the art is just in it being unrefined, in the final product being unrefined, and I just have a tendency to just keep harping and trying to finish things. So, yeah. Well, thanks.
yeah.
Appreciate it, guys.
I was
Yeah.
listening to a
I would
podcast that. Go ahead, Du. Go ahead.
I would like to like if we were to move like from this topic to something else, I would like to touch something like a final point. So Double Impact. One thing that hasn't been mentioned about this project is that actually, aside from getting it as the first project released by the first curated project released by Bethesda, and getting that sweet money,
Right. Yeah.
it's also a part of Freedom,
Yes.
which means that basically Freedom Double Impact is also completely free to any sort of modifications and further use.
Right.
And I would like
It's true.
to this is sort of like a really huge decision. It doesn't seem like much, but you're basically giving out all of the rights.
Right. And I remember talking with Rod about this. I can't remember if Kato had approached us or if I just happened to mention it to him offhand, but a lot of the Freedom maps suck.
Yes.
And like as I just said, 10 minutes ago. In 2001 or 2002, whenever that was, I remember like donating middies to that project. And Fraggle had started that project with John D. And I always wanted to see that project do well because I think that it's a pretty noble cause. And unfortunately, sometimes there's just not the talent out there to do stuff like the sprite work or whatever, and they don't want to really kind of dedicate it to that. But for me, first off, I didn't think that id Software was going to knock on my door and be like, "Hey, can we make your maps official? Can you be like an official Doom mapper?" So I kind of thought that it was just done, and it's like, well, I mean, I guess we could either make a list where like we just made a list one year of like a CACO award winner, and when Do disappears one day, everyone else will forget about Double Impact. And I just figured it was a way to kind of just pass it on to maybe the next generation of Doom players. And some people seem to appreciate it, and I've read the forums, and some people like don't like the fact that it has an episode that was released already. So elsewhere, they kind of want like an original thing. But that actually isn't the first project that we donated to them. They had the free DM, the free deathmatch version of the project. We give them the entirety of UDMX. So I'm totally fine with it. You know, if people want to take my maps and make them into something cooler or better, like go for it. You know, if some random dude posts it on the iTunes store and makes like $20, I really don't care. You know, I don't think anyone's becoming rich off of my maps. That's how I feel about it. Did I sufficiently answer your question?
Yeah. I don't expect there to be any Jeff Bezos of the future that springs up because they started on DB Impact.
No, me either. I just it's just a way to kind of give back. You know, as corny as it sounds, Doom has really shaped my life, not just the game, but the people around it, and I think in a positive way. Doom has helped me get jobs. It has helped me learn new skills. You know, when I would
it's
kind of put
completely
together websites or
admirable.
music. Yeah. So I just want to give back. It's the best I can do. You know, I'm not a programmer, so any other area that I can give back, I'm down with it. I'm cool with it.
Well, we're coming up on our 17th hour here. Is there anything that we
Part one, right?
what didn't we talk about that we want to squeak in here? Squeeze in, I should say.
Oh, geez. I don't know. Unless you're looking to do a deep dive into some sort of topic, we covered most
at a later. Yeah.
Ralphis hacking
most of
Doom
the main.
World, I guess.
Oh yeah, all that sort of stuff. Well, I mean, yeah, there's all sorts of crazy events and also like the Me versus Blood Skull.
Oh
Yeah.
my god, yeah. Oh,
Yeah, there's also or Me versus Carnival. We could do a whole episode on Me versus. So
That's true.
Me versus Bones.
Yeah, that could be
So,
that could be a couple episodes actually.
I mean,
yeah,
we would have actually get to the bald memes and and shit like that.
yeah. Whatever. Yeah. I mean, what can I say? I don't know. I feel like we hit most of the
No, yeah.
major points.
I think
I would. Do I get to do like a final pitch on the interview of like things to look out?
if you want, if you
Please.
want to do like a final speech, inspire
Okay.
the new generations.
Yeah. So, Doomers, old and young alike, I'm here today to implore that you head to odamex.net and download Odamex 0.9 sometime in mid to late February. Not just for yourself, but for the greater good of the Doom community. And yeah, Odamex is coming. So check out 0.9.
Some of you
It's really
may
good.
die, but that's a risk we're willing to take.
Yeah.
Odamex is coming.
Odamex is a huge passion project, and I love it, and I really like working with the people on it. And Alex and Chow and Hobo have been working super hard on it, and it's going to be great. So when it comes out, if you've listened for 3 hours and 4 minutes already, make sure that you use that final minute to go download Odamex 0.9. Sound good?
Sounds good to me. It's Odamex.net, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
Odamex.net.
I've never been there before, so.
Mm.
All right. Well, thanks, Ralph.
Thank you.
It's been a long,
It's long,
a long. It's been almost as long as an MDF event. So I thank you for sticking around. And
someone could get through half a day at work on this.
I'm sure that I'm sure we'll have you on the show again. So thanks for joining us.
Remember when
you.
I promised you that this would take at most 2.5 hours? I lied.
I've been watching the clock.
I don't like that clock is there because it makes a liar out of me. You know.
Yeah, well, you already caught me in the middle of a story, so
Sure.
You guys are smart. That's why you do this. Well, I had fun. It was good.
Yeah, it was good.
You be on top.
Yo, 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 Doom is Deadites. What up? It's your boy, the Motherload, producer of this show, and I'm here to remind you that if you are enjoying Doom is Dead podcast, you may also enjoy some other podcasts in our network, including In the Keep podcast and the brand spanking new Burning Bridges with Bridge Burner, now available on a podcast directory near you. Stay in the Doom is Dead